Welcome to the regular scheduled meeting for the Rossmoor Community Services District. Tonight is Tuesday, May 8, 2012. Ms. Steering, will we have the roll call, please?
Director Casey?
Here.
Director Kahlert?
Here.
Director Maynard?
Here.
Director Rips?
I think I'm here.
President Coletta?
Here. Would you join with us at this time as we pledge our allegiance to the flag of the United States? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, Mr. Taboada. Do we have some presentations this evening?
Mr. President, members of the board, you have one presentation from Lieutenant Wren regarding the crime statistics for Rossmoor. There is no one here from OCTA for their update of the West County Connector project, but I will report on their behalf after the crime statistics.
Okay. Lieutenant Wren, you want to come up and make your presentation?
Good evening. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, just drove up here from San Diego, so it's just kind of got here. The quarterly stats for 2012 are kind of a mixed bag. We're still having a fair number of property crimes, or too many property crimes. So I can go through. The way I have them listed out, like I always do, and break them down: January, February, March. If you look at January, you'll see a couple of unsecured garage doors that caused people just walked in and stole some things right out of it. A number of vehicle burglaries where we've had more forced entry, where they smash a window and get in, and then had kind of a fair number of vandalisms. They seem to be random. I don't have any real tie. Each one has an individual cause. Broken windows on parked cars, scratched paint, that type of thing. If you go to February, same type of thing, a number of residential burglaries with forced entry. We have had a couple more of the catalytic converter thefts, which I haven't seen in about 2 years. And just as another note, just recently we had another third row seat taken just this week, which I hadn't seen that in about a year. We did have one stolen car, and there was a recovered stolen located nearby, which would lead us to believe that a person dropped the stolen car off there, typically when it's low on gas, and stole another one. And then a couple more thefts in March. And I've spoken with Investigator Purser, who is the investigator for this area. He's really put a lot of effort into investigating these events. He actually formed, I guess you'd call it, an informal task force. He had a meeting with LA Sheriff, Seal Beach PD, Los Al PD, Cypress PD. They all got together, all the investigators, to handle these general crimes, and then just got their technology together. They have a mass cell phone blast, so each one can blast everybody with anything. And as a result of that, they've recently took a Rossmoor resident, a young male. He was in custody. The time that he was in custody, our property crimes dropped a lot. We've only had, I wanted so bad, it was up until the day before yesterday, that we had a total of 3. That's 1 burglary and 2 thefts in April. But then we had an attempted burglary the other day, and we did have the loss of the third row seat. The new one that we had is kind of a disturbing new nuance, which is it broke into the parked car in a driveway, took out the garage door opener, opened the garage door, entered the garage door by use of the garage door opener. So we are making, there's people that want to steal stuff from Rossmoor residents, and our way to address it is through aggressive patrol and really working with the investigators. I think Investigator Purse is doing a good job of bringing everyone together, because whereas we recognize the borders, the criminals do not. So by getting everybody, LaSalle, Seal Beach, Cypress, everybody working together, they've had some success. As far as response times, again, the comparison on this particular chart shows they've dropped down a little bit, but they're still, you know, where I want them is in that 5-minute range, and our drive times have been okay. I did a lot of research on this and looked to see how long these calls were sitting in dispatch, which has been an ongoing issue. To be honest with you, it's pretty reasonable. I mean, we start the clock when that phone rings, and it's taken about 1 minute and 16 seconds for them to take the call, which to me is a reasonable amount of time. To take the call, type it in, send it over. It's sitting with the dispatcher for roughly 1 minute. It's taken us a little bit under 5 minutes to get there. The numbers, I don't like this number, the 751. However, there are 2 specific calls. There's only a total of 10. So there's 2 calls that really impacted it. One I had a 12-minute and 37-second response time. The other one was it was 14 minutes and 43 seconds. That first call was a result of, we had a kidnapping, not here, a kidnapping in Midway City. So the deputy responded from here to assist with that kidnapping. That's a, you know, priority situation. And he was late in responding to a prowler. The other one, the 14 minutes and 43 seconds, was as a result of, I've got a deputy in the audience here. She was responding to what we like the residents to report are suspicious people. She had 2 people detained and ended up taking, they were peddlers who were brought in, they're called in, they were out here peddling. I'm not sure what they were peddling. Do you remember? Newspapers. Well, they both had warrants, and she took them both to jail. So that took her out of the field. And we had a deputy that was had to go to a training. We have mandated training that we have to do. He was on a 4-hour block of training. So those were 2. If you take those 2 out of the equation, which I know you shouldn't because it is what it is, but that knocks the times down to just below 6 minutes. So we're getting there. It's a problem. I have, like I say, it's not like paving a street where I can fix it and it's good for a while. It's just something that I have to pay attention to pretty much every day of trying to keep people in here. I want them taking people to jail. So you take somebody to jail, it kind of you know, makes us a little thin for a little while they're going to jail and back. So that's our major issue. We had a pretty decent, I thought a very, very good showing on Sunday. Got the helicopter out here. They actually got a boat up here, which I was surprised. I asked for everything, and I'm happy with whatever they can show up with. The dog was here, so I think we're doing okay. We're making progress. It's not perfect, but I think we're doing all right. Any questions from anyone?
Well, it seems like in spite of like those 2 calls that took an inordinate amount of time, with good reason, that the response times are significantly better than they were a year ago at this time. So they're obviously headed in the right direction.
Absolutely. It's just we have a goal where we want to hit, you want to hit 5 minutes, under 5 minutes. And so we're getting there, progressively getting.
Yeah, it sounds like you're working on it very diligently, so that's a very good thing.
And it's just trying to keep people in the community. I don't know if you guys know Deputy Cheka. He's got white hair. Kind of looks like Santa Claus. He was hurt. He was out for a while. He hurt his Achilles. and just absolutely begged me to get him back in Rossmoor. He really loves the community, so he's going to be back here. The people that are assigned to Rossmoor are staying, which is something that Henry really he and I talked a lot about it, and it's been very successful. So I think we're doing all right.
The other thing is, like, in terms of the types of burglaries and the other crimes in our neighborhood, is it similar, do you know, like in our adjoining communities in terms of these types of things?
They have
happening
absolute
globally?
commonalities, and what's interesting is this is a bedroom community. Is these thefts are during the day. I mean, we know they're during the day when people are at work.
Crimes of opportunity.
Well, to me, I define a crime of opportunity as walking down the street and there's a Garmin GPS or a laptop sitting inside an unsecured car. That's a crime of opportunity. When you're breaking into somebody's house, that's something. There's malice, there's some planning involved.
Okay.
And you're doing it at a specific time where you know the residents are not at home. So, and we just keep patrol cars driving around and investigators out here tracking them down.
Yeah. You put up a chart that listed types of reports for several years. Yeah, right there in the far left of that chart. If you look at 2012, I'm just curious for comparison's sake, are the numbers for 2011 and 2012, are the 2011 numbers annual numbers or quarterly numbers, and the 2012 numbers are those quarterly numbers?
Right, so 2011, that's a full year, and now this is the first quarter of 12.
Okay, so if I go look at the type of report of residential burglary, 459.
459, correct.
Right. In 2011, we had 27. Now we're tracking to 28, which is fine, but and actually that's a vehicle crime. But if we look at 459, a residential,
Correct,
it'll be an increase from 33 to 48.
correct.
Any,
If it tracks in that same manner.
the
But-
trend line goes.
But like I was saying, up until the day before yesterday, I had one in April, so I was pretty excited that we were seeing a downward trend. We were having a very a considerable spike in those.
Yeah, the same thing with vandalism. I mean that would have been from 26 to 44. So,
And that is one that just scratched my head on that, because we had a spike a couple months back, and that was 2 girls egging cars. That thing. These are random. They're typically a personal. Most of your vandalisms are personal. They're like, I've had a couple in here. They flatten tires. It's a lot of time it's boyfriend girlfriend type of relationship things, and that's I don't really have an explanation as to why there's been a little spike in those.
okay. And then just my only other nitpicky question, and I'll let you go. Is there any? I mean, I love the monthly summary of crimes. I think it's great. It's informative. It's perfect. But if you read this, it's like I'm reading something and it's like, okay, somebody took jewelry. They took a Bluetooth earpiece. Oh yeah, and there was like a bunch of guns taken. I mean, is there any way that we can kind of say, okay, this is random stuff, a Bluetooth earpiece, and then there's massive amount of weapons stolen. We can get that kind of highlighted perhaps? I mean, that kind of it seems like it may be a little bit buried in the report at some phase.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't ever really thought of it, because to us it's one report at a time, unless it's something really significant.
I mean, somebody taking a catalytic converter doesn't really scare me. Somebody that takes weapons, that sort of alerts my ears a little bit. I go, oh, wow.
Well, weapons, for you to go buy a handgun is an ordeal. You have to go through a whole bunch of stuff. Most criminals get their weapons in residential burglaries.
Right.
The vast majority of them. So they're not in there necessarily saying, I'm going to enter this house with the intent of, because I know he's got a weapon. It's during the process of the burglary they come across it, and they're absolutely going to take it. So we're trying, over the years, I've tried at every forum I've ever gone to, is try to get people to secure their weapons inside their house in a safe, do something with it, as opposed to put it where everyone puts it, which is either under the bed or in the dresser table, because that's the first place that they look. Mm-hmm. So, but I understand your concern. I will.
I just like an iPad being stolen versus a weapon. It's like, well, wait a minute,
Right.
So they want to use an iPad as a weapon.
They could, I suppose. It's worth more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got
Yes,
a
sir.
couple of questions. I'm looking at the total reports or records that you have. And if you look at last quarter, we had 268. This quarter, we had 442. What do you attribute that to? Is that our neighborhood watch being more diligent?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, those are calls that are generated from the community, which is what we've been, kind of pounding on, and so people are listening. And that's not just me. You've got a lot of nice community groups in this area that newsletters, and they really push the awareness. And then that's everything. That's from a suspicious person. There's a lot of animal-related calls that we get, which we'll still respond to and do our best with. But that's everything, and it's people being concerned and calling us.
Good. The other thing is, I can't recall at what time, maybe it was a couple months ago, I was under the impression that the Rossmoor deputies weren't going to back up another sheriff precinct or area. So when you told us that one of our deputies was actually helping out something, that came as a surprise to us, because I was under the impression that our guys, at least for the year, were going to stay here, and they wouldn't be backing anything up.
Well, we always back up anybody. I mean, we go and back up Seal Beach, and we back up Los Al, and we back up anyone who needs it. The focus is to keep them here, but in this particular one, I mean, it was a kidnapping, which is a very significant event. The deputies are going to respond to it. The difficult thing is to turn around because that's what everybody wants to go to, that type of a call. So to get to them there, as long as they're needed, it's fine. But as soon as they're not needed, to turn around and get them back. And that's pretty much universal everywhere. Everyone always has to go under critical circumstances to help. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I had more people, but that's just the way. It's just how it has to happen when we have a case like that. And kidnappings are extremely rare, so that was just something that happened, and they responded to it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Is that just the sheriffs that will respond anywhere, or the local city police will also report to things like that?
If a deputy asks for help, or if they get, I don't get into all the specifics of Red Channel, but we're on different radio channels, but on a common radio channel, you'll have officers go anywhere. If it's that type of, if it's a shooting, a kidnapping, a child abduction, you'll have anybody, they'll go to wherever they can, as long as they're being useful, and then they turn around and get back to their jurisdiction.
So just last question, you're attributing the higher number to more diligence on our part, as opposed to there's actually more crime going on?
Oh, as far as the numbers? Yeah, because those are just calls. That's all they are. They're just calls for service.
They're not actual.
So it's good. It's got the guys out here keeping them busy.
Not just guys.
Yes. I use it as a general term.
That's it, thanks.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant. I don't think we have any more questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Taboada? If you'd like to state your question, you can, but if not, we'll move on. So, why don't you do it outside? Thank you. All right, Mr. Taboada, we have another presentation.
Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, I attend a weekly meeting of the Orange County Transit Authority / Caltrans project status meetings every Monday afternoon. And in those meetings, we obtain information which we then pass on to the board, and through the RHA representative gets passed on to the community. Several months ago, we got word that there was a scheduling issue resulting from the completion of the Valley View Bridge construction project, which would then signal the beginning of the Seal Beach Bridge project, or the I-405. That project, the I-405 bridge widening project, was scheduled and is scheduled for June of this year. There was also on calendar a 12-day closure of the southbound 605 to the southbound 405 tunnel, which carries, we're told, approximately 30,000 cars per day, and that it would be necessary during the course of these projects to close that tunnel for 12 calendar days. The impact from that, we surmised, was going to be dramatic in that the Seal Beach overpass would be restricted to 2 lanes, 1 each way, and a 3rd lane for public safety use, which would restrict the traffic on LaSalle and Seal Beach Boulevards to to some degree. But when you couple that with the potential for that 12-day closure and having all of those cars spill onto local streets such as Catella and Cerritos and who knows where, that really would impact the Rossmoor community, the Seal Beach community, and parts of Los Alamitos. We asked, and we've been told by OCTA that they are diligently working on some way to avoid those 2 events occurring simultaneously. So I'd like to read into the record the last response that we got from Caltrans as to the status of that study of how to avoid that conflict. Caltrans has requested their designer to verify an additional stage that can be added to avoid the Seal Beach Boulevard lane reduction and the 12-day closure of the SB southbound 605 to the southbound 405 connector at the same time. We expect to review the plans and determine, if feasible, by the end of May 2012. And I can tell you that they're working on it because at these meetings that I attend, they discuss and give us updates on their progress with working with the respective contractors as to how this is all going to play out. But as of now, we don't have a solution, even though we're hopeful that one will be obtained before the work begins on one or both of these 2 project sequences. So I will keep the board updated as we receive more information, and at some point, we should get something definitive from Caltrans, and hopefully before your June meeting of next month. That's my report regarding the 605 I-405 project.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question. When you go to these meetings, have they talked about when they're going to close down the southbound 7th Street to 405 southbound?
That's not contemplated except for some work that's being done there. That's not,
I was under the impression that they were going to shut that down for a while. You know, we finally get the bridge to 7th Street back, and I heard somewhere, I have a recall.
there's still some work to be done on that 7th Street
Okay.
part of the project, but nothing that comes close to what we're talking about here.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you.
Mr. President, also, Liz reminds me that we've provided you with a flyer for the public hearings for the I-405 project, which is separate from what is going on now, the West County Connector project, and it'll be on our website, and there'll be one of those public hearings here in Rossmoor in this auditorium in June of 8th, I believe, close to that.
I think it's the 7th.
7th, is it the 7th?
I believe so.
So the public is being kept informed of what's going on with this freeway reconstruction, and anyone who wants to can stop by our office and pick up a card that will put them on a mailing list or a database list so that they get updates almost daily from OCTA. That's
Very
my
good.
report, sir.
All right, are you ready to proceed with B1?
Yes, sir. We received an invitation from Los Alamitos City Manager Angie Avery regarding the continued televising of these meetings, the RCSD board meetings. As you know, when the franchise agreement with Orange County terminated with Time Warner, we were required then to contract for our own, not broadcasting, but production of our board meetings. At the same time, Los Alamitos lost revenue that they were being paid to air the board meetings on LATV3. That funding terminated in March of this year. Los Alamitos has continued to put our meetings on LATV3, but they are looking for us to try to offset at least a part of what revenue they lost from the termination of the Time Warner agreement. And so I'm asking you to by a 4/5 vote, put this item onto the agenda as an added item so that the board can discuss whether or not you wish to proceed with a proposal to Los Alamitos to air these board meetings. And basically the proposal from the Cable Commission from Los Alamitos is a figure in the range of $250 to $300 per month to air the district meetings on LATV3. The board has previously discussed the value of having our meetings run on YouTube. We've also talked about whether or not it's also beneficial to have it run on local television. So I leave it to the board first to vote to put it on the agenda if you desire to do so, and then deal with the issue as a board.
Well, if anyone would like to make the motion, you can.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
That we put it on, I guess that's your motion.
That's the motion.
Yes, okay.
Requires a 4/5 vote of the board.
Just make sure I understand, we're just voting to discuss it.
To put
To
it
move
on
it
the
on
agenda.
to the agenda,
Yeah.
then after it's approved 3 at a minimum out of the 5 to get on the agenda, that at some point in time, it'll be discussed. All right, I'm going to call for the question then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I oppose. But the motion carries because there's more than 3 that said aye. So, will we set it later on in the agenda, or should we proceed?
No, sir, it's appropriate to deal with that subject matter now that you've placed it onto the agenda as part of B, additions to the agenda. You have in front of you a communication from Angie Avery, City Manager of Los Alamitos, on behalf of the Los Alamitos Cable Commission, and basically my report to you stating that you consider the proposal from the Los Al Cable Commission to continue to put these board meetings onto LATV3.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I think we should discuss this. Where's everybody at on this one here? Because I'm torn.
Yeah, I don't want to, I'm not voting until I flesh this out.
Exactly, and that's what we're here to do, is flush this out right now
Yeah.
and speak about. Where I'm torn is, while Mr. Tabuada called it revenue, it was some kind of, I see it as some kind of slush fund that communities got based on cable subscription to then be able to have the power to do public access for things that are indeed public. People in Rossmoor paid into the cable subscribers who lived in Rossmoor, paid into that, and we got the benefit. Somehow times have changed in Time Warner. Maybe it's no longer, the law, but for some reason that slush fund went away. What does it really cost for someone to put this programming on air? Airtime to me seems free. So I kind of struggle with the fact that they're asking for $300 when they're probably putting on their city council meetings and not charging their government for it. So I'm a little torn on that, but then on the other hand, I'm conflicted with the fact that for $300, people who don't have access to come to these meetings or do not have access to YouTube. So I'm also very interested in what the community has to say on this one, because on this one I am torn. And since we're discussing it, obviously everyone needs to kind of put in their 2 cents, but that's where I'm at right now.
Well, it's $3,600 a year, so it's not, say it's $300, it's $3,600 a year, right?
Well, the
Mr.
proposal is $250 a month to $300 a month, so
Okay, so $3,000 to $35, roughly $3,000 to $3,600 a year.
correct.
Because we wouldn't budget for a month, we budget for a
Correct.
12-month period, right? So one of my questions is, how long is this contract valid for? Is it a 1-year contract? Is it a 2-year? Is it a 3 years? A 5-year?
Well, we have no contract or no proposal for any term or any content.
That would be my first question. What is that term? Okay.
It's whatever you would want it to be.
And then the second question, and then another question would be, what does that include? And more importantly, what does that not include?
It simply means putting our board meetings on LATV3 on the current schedule as it's currently aired, which is several times per month.
Do we dictate the time? Does
No.
that dictate the time?
It's their channel.
So LATV3, so it
Could
could
be
be
at 3 in the morning.
3 AM on a Monday night?
They air it, if you look at the schedule that's published, they air it 3 or 4 times a week for a month, so about 12 times per month, at various times and days.
Mr. Casey?
Well, the one thing, and it's probably hard to know this, is how many people do not have access to a computer where they could view the meeting on YouTube, so that they would be restricted from not seeing our board activities at all if we were not to show them on LATV3. I've heard reports that there are more and more people having access with each passing month, and I'm sure it's hard to know, but I mean, if it was like 90% of our community had access to YouTube, I would flat out say we would not consider it, but it's just something that would be good to know, or at least to have a general feel for.
Well, I can only speak to what I know personally, and it's
Sure.
my own home situation. I just talked to my sister this afternoon, and I asked that, she said if she felt better, she was going to come down and watch the meeting. And I said, well, you can watch it on YouTube. She says, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
My
See,
wife-
that's a concern I have.
My
that there's
wife
gonna be-
does, but my sister doesn't.
Right.
And they're, you know, it's there's no way to tell without.
Right, because I really don't want to shut anybody out. If it's going to be a significant impact, that whatever viewership we have, that we'd be losing a lot of it if we don't do something about having it televised on LATV3. And yet I don't want to be held hostage either, as Mr. Maynard was suggesting could be the case.
Well, you could suggest a different number. There's no, you know, this is just a.
Oh, in terms of the amount we,
It's a number that was suggested by their cable commission.
I don't think it's a
okay.
figure so much. I'm not worried whether it's 35,000 or, I mean,
3,500.
500 or $3,000. That's not going to break anybody's bank account here. I think it's one of those, it's a conceptual decision. Do we want to pull off of broadcast TV and go strictly streaming internet and taped internet? Or do we as a board want to maintain some type of broadcast TV presence? I think that's
That's the question.
that's the main question. It's not, if it was $300,000, then obviously that would be a different parameter, but $3,500 or $3,000, that's not going to kill anybody here. So I think it's more of, do we want to pull out of LA3 and just go say, hey, you know, we're not going to do that, we're going to go straight internet, or are we going to maintain a dual communication channel? I think that's something for the community to chime in, perhaps all, 20 of you to come up to the board and talk to us, perhaps, or not, and we'll make the decision for the community.
Strips, any comment?
I guess I'm also conflicted. The money part is, I mean, we have to make a decision on that. It's not a huge amount of money over the course of the year. I guess just conceptually, are we trying to be a cutting-edge community and saying we're going all internet, or are we taking a step backwards? And since every other community that has these board meetings are televised on TV, and now all of a sudden we're saying we're not going to be on TV, I don't know what the viewership is. I really don't. I have no idea. I don't even know in the best-case scenario what people are watching on TV or not. I just think there's an importance to say who we are. We're trying to move forward with getting latent powers and some other things with the county, and all of a sudden we lose our presence. And there's something uncomfortable for me about that.
Branding.
That it is branding, but it's also is a key part of communicating with our community. And then all of a sudden we're not on TV. It just feels like we're taking that step backwards. I don't like the idea of having to pay somebody to do it when we've had that opportunity beforehand, but I also think it's important to have that presence.
My recollection serves me correct. 2 months ago, we had a discussion here on this very topic. We had 2 of 3 vendors present. And we also had input from the community. And I walked away with the sense before I cast my vote that the majority of those spoke that evening wanted to do the very thing we voted for 60 days ago. And that is not to go with the broadcast as an option. Am I correct?
I don't remember.
I
Have
wish
any
I
memory,
recalled.
retention on the topic, Mr. Chabot?
Well, there was a discussion, and I think the majority of the board was very much in favor of the YouTube option.
Right.
Because that is new, it's, as you point out, cutting edge, and based on the information that Liz gets back on our hits on that we get a sizable number of people who are using that option for board meetings. If you have DirecTV, for instance, that's the only way that you can observe the board meetings. If you have Time Warner or Verizon,
Right.
then you can view it on your FiOS or your Time Warner channel. So there's a number of ways in which people can access the meeting. The value, I think, of the YouTube option is that it's when you want to see it. The LATV3 option is whenever they put it on the air. And sometimes it's difficult if, unless you have a schedule, to know when that is.
I think I'm making a dangerous assumption here that I'm assuming that if we do the LATV option through the city of Los Alamitos, that we will also maintain a YouTube presence? Is
A
that-
what, sir? Maintain a what?
A YouTube presence?
Oh,
Or would
without
No, we do
question.
that ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we would absolutely have that in addition to being live broadcast,
Not live, but tape,
taped delay.
yes.
All right, okay, just wanted to clarify that.
The other thing
But
that
to
I'm-
answer your question, you did have a discussion, and
We did.
the majority of you were very high on the YouTube option because it was,
But there was also the option of the three packages to get it on to Channel 3 or comparable channel so that the public could view it as we traditionally for years have broadcasted our meetings. Not live, but a day after or 3 days later. We intentionally, by a majority of this board that voted then, not to go with that option, but to go with the process we have today. Having said that, I'm also concerned and I'm troubled why now we should have to contribute towards that.
well, when you had that discussion 2 months ago, you did not have a proposal from
Well,
LATV3.
Let me cut you off for just a moment. Wasn't there a discussion between yourself and the manager for the city of Los Al, and they were not going to basically publish our broadcasts? Wasn't that the response we got as opposed to what we see here tonight?
Well, that initial discussion took place when the then new city manager did not understand the intricacies of the cable commission and how they functioned and what role they played. So the city manager could not speak on their behalf. She had to take this to them and say, what do you want to do? And the first response we got was, why don't you, Rossmoor, make a proposal to us to put it on the air? And I basically responded, how do I respond to that without knowing what your expectations are? I mean, I'm not going to put something on the table without knowing what it is you're expecting or what you would be acceptable to you. The response back then to that was, okay, they go back to the Cable Commission. The Cable Commission says, look, we'd like to continue this relationship. Would you consider $250 to $300 a month? Which is far more reasonable than what I heard through the grapevine that they were trying to somehow make up for loss of that $15,000, which was.
That's what I remember.
Is it a money issue?
Well, I remember I think when we discussed this 2 months ago, we were all against Rossmoor absorbing $15,000 that Time Warner used to pay. I think that's where we embraced the YouTube. And I think, Bill, you said some smart things earlier. I think there could be a compromise here, that instead of just cutting off, maybe we do this for the next 6 months. I think we have a 6-month agreement with the production facility, tie in for another 6 months, but let people know that, this might be going away, this might be changing, and let's see what the community says. And I would also go back to them and saying, you said 200 to 350, I heard 200. I obviously press them for the least amount that we can, and wing people off of it if they're actually people who are actually viewing it. Again, I do know that there's a lot more people with internet, Wi-Fi, et cetera, than cable TV, which continues to be declining compared to Vios and to DirecTV.
Well, we have some people here in the audience. I don't want to cut anybody off, but if anyone wants to take a moment, just a minute or two, and has a point of view you didn't express it 60 days ago, maybe you did and you have a change of heart, or maybe you don't care and you don't care to approach. But if there's anyone that wishes to give us some feedback, I'd relish hearing some comments.
Good evening, Chad Stewart, a Rossmoor resident. I don't know what the demand is for viewing of it, but obviously that's dynamic and can change in the future. So if it's a moot point right now, what will it be in a year from now? Maybe these meetings could be packed in a year, and this will definitely come into play, and the majority of those people coming to those meetings would have YouTube access and would be very interested in. So I think it's, Mr. Cahart, you talked about a contract. Maybe it's something that, and it's not a pressing need now, but in the future, it could be. So that's my only thing, is to project this into the future. If it's not a big deal now, it could be later on. Thank you.
Don Brune. I live in Rossmoor. It seems to me that if we tried this community partnership with them for some reasonable fee for a year and then reviewed it, because I think the situation is dynamic. I think right now we'd probably lose potentially 15% of our constituents.
Why do you say that,
10 to
Why
15%.
Don, why do you say 15%?
Well, I don't have hard numbers.
That's why I'm asking. So, I mean, you're
Well,
throwing it out
I
there
look at
so
the demographics of my church, which is in this community, and the community itself. And some people may have Dish, but a lot of people probably just had cable TV, especially in the affected piece of the demography. And it's probably 15% would be maybe high, but it could be as much as that. But it's more than likely 10. If we did this for a year, we could maybe somehow survey the community and just get their feeling in one of the newsletters and ask for feedback.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave Burgess, resident Rossmoor. I think we're getting a few hundred hits even on YouTube from the last meeting. Unfortunately, we had no data about how many people were actually watching on LATV. Maybe we put it in a newsletter like the gentleman suggested. You know, if you used to watch it on the LATV, you think it's important enough, but you can't watch it on YouTube, call us. I'll bet you don't get 5 people. Okay, I'm not going to bet, but I'm just guessing. I don't think there's that much demand. And if LATV can't commit it to broadcast it at 10 a.m. every Tuesday for 4 weeks, I think to give them any money for it is not worth doing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe I'm harping on something that's just not that big of a point, but I just look at what I think are the demographics of this community, and there's definitely, if you look at a bell curve, there's definitely a retired portion of the community that's been here 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years that may not be completely internet savvy, such as perhaps we are, and they're perhaps be retired, and they like to watch it on the TV. They don't watch on the computer. They may watch their stock portfolio on the computer, but they want to see something. That just sits in the back of my mind, and I don't know if we cut it off, if that's going to be something that part of the community is going to go, wait a minute, where'd it go? I don't know.
I don't think that we should bite on the monthly rate that they're suggesting, number one. Number two, there's no need to run into this. We've been already a month or so without broadcasts on TV.
It's been broadcast. It's still being broadcast.
Okay. I like the idea of sending a newsletter out and inviting the next newsletter, whether it's in July,
You could send out an e-blast as well earlier than that.
an e-blast, and getting a consensus. And then depending upon the consensus, determine whether we even engage the city manager. I don't think we should engage him unless we get a consensus. And we might get, like Mr. Berger says, 5 people, and you might get 50 people.
That makes a lot of sense.
Even if you had 50 people who said, I don't have access anymore, you can burn a DVD in our office for $1 a piece at $50 versus
I
$3.50.
agree.
Not to be,
I agree.
again, concentrating on the financial. To me, it's all about transparency, about being open and having access to what goes on here if people need it. And if they can't get it off there, they need to get it somehow.
Yeah.
Or else-
So,
Or else another option is to broadcast it for the next 6 months and say it's going off the air December 31st.
That was my weaning idea.
We
So-
unless there's a big groundswell, it's done the, calendar year 2012.
Well, Mr. President, members of the board, not this latest newsletter, but 3 months ago, in my column, I reported that this was going to happen. And as far as I know, we didn't get one response to that. And we sent out over 3,000 newsletters, so that's something for you to consider.
Right, but if
So
you-
our viewership is low and our readership.
If you do an email newsletter. I think if you do it, I think if you were to do a poll, like a one-question poll, I think you get much more of a response, whether it's buried in a 7-paragraph state of the district address. I'm just throwing on the table, if it was said, hey, this is a community poll, there's 1 or 2 questions, answer and respond, you might get a bigger sample size telling us how they feel.
You could also do polls on our Facebook page. I have no idea how many people go to that, but that's pretty easy to do.
You could do that, or through Constant Contact.
Yeah, and do
That's
it
an
through
email,
that,
just-
yeah. So
you can
we've
just
got
email
methods.
survey, just, hey, 2-question pulse of the community.
Of course, when you do a blast or constant contact, the assumption is people have a computer.
That's true. It's going to be skewed if you do that. That's, of course.
well, from what I'm hearing tonight, we're not going to consummate any contract. We're not going to
Right.
call them up and say we want a better rate. What I'm hearing is we're going to approach this objectively and see what the community sentiment is, again, having already noticed them in the last newsletter this was going to happen. We've heard both sides of the aisle tonight. So unless there's a motion, can we just get a motion as to at least testing the water and with regards to our community? Some folks talked about electronic means of testing the community if there's an interest. Others said a newsletter.
Yeah, survey. I think
Okay,
there's some- I
well,
think
who
there's
wants
some
to
type of
make,
community survey.
does someone want to frame a motion as to how we would
Okay,
determine what the
I'll try.
temperature is of the
I'm
community?
going to try to
All
do
right.
a motion here. Here we go. I motion that the board does not, well, I'm going to try again, that's take 2 now. I motion that we reach out to the community to find out their level interest in whether they want it on cable TV, YouTube, et cetera. And in the interim, we just kind of table this until we get further clarity and advice from our constituents.
Okay, so my question there, do we want to wrap a time frame around that proposal? 30 days, 45 days, 60 days?
I need to tell the city manager something. I have an obligation to
Yeah, exactly.
respond.
That's why I'm
Okay.
getting back, because that's very open-ended, that could be forever.
At least 60 days.
At least,
Yeah, it has to be 2 months. Right,
2 months.
It takes time.
yeah.
Take that
well,
much time.
newsletter,
You can do an email.
It depends
in
what
a
we're
day.
doing. If we're doing an email blast, it
It's
doesn't.
like a day.
but that's for those who have the computer again, going back to.
Exactly.
So we still need to have the newsletter, or maybe there's a,
We
But
can
if
say
it's
more than a
newsletter,
month. You
it's
can't-
longer than that because it's not until July that
You
we're
can't
sending
push them
letters.
off for 2 months.
Yeah.
I say it's a month max. It could be 2 weeks. I mean, we can get, this is instant, like, you want it? Yes, no?
Well, it just depends, and if we send it out via constant contact, then we're basically saying we're only asking the people who
Have computers.
computers and have given us their email addresses. Right, so if we are concerned that there are people out there that don't have computers and aren't going to watch it on YouTube, then we're sending that email
Yeah.
survey to those people that have the computers, it makes it an irrelevant survey.
So you want to put it
Somewhat.
on the next RHA newsletter? I mean, our next newsletter, when is that? When does it go to publication?
Ours just went out, so
Oh, perfect.
we're a few months
Right.
into the future. for
That's
our
too
next-
long a delay.
Festival, oh,
Have a- yeah, Good one.
thanks.
So I don't know what the time frame is.
I'm comfortable with a couple months. I mean, that isn't the only task that the staff has to deal with. I mean,
Well, the question is, Mr. Taboada is saying he needs to get back to them. Our newsletter goes out when, in July, is it?
I believe so, yeah.
Right, so if it goes out in July, that means we're not going to get the information really until our August board meeting. Which, if that's the case, then that's the
Yeah.
case.
I would advise Mr. Taboada just to communicate with them that it's under review.
You know what, here, I'm going to
Yeah.
do, I'm going to throw this on the table.
Sure.
Spitball it.
well, there's a motion.
We have
so-
to,
Yeah, he's,
So we can accept the motion with a second, or it dies.
do we have a time frame on it? Is it 60 days? Is that what we?
Is that correct?
I have
Mr.
no
Mayor?
idea.
I am putting 60 days.
All right. Anyone want a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Going to call for the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
opposed.
2 opposed?
Yep.
Okay. So it's 3-2. So,
I just am curious how we're going to, I understand we want to do this, but we just set a time frame that we can't meet.
what do you mean we can't meet?
Our newsletter doesn't go out until July.
Correct.
So if we're sending that thing out in July, and if I'm doing 60 days, we're May, June, July, it's going to go out in 60 days, we're not going to be able to get the information back until 90 days. So we just chose a date, a deadline that we can't,
Yeah.
based on I don't understand why
I'm
we,
going to help you out right now. I'm going to look into the camera with the red light.
that camera over there?
Anybody, or that camera right there, anybody watching this tonight
Change it back.
who wants to continue to watch this one, make sure that this program comes over your cable TV, please reach out to the RCSD and speak loudly. We actually want to hear from you. And if there's enough people calling, obviously that's part of the input that we get. So if you like this program, you want to continue seeing it on your cable, please call the office at RCSD. Thanks.
If it cannot be met, Mr. Taboada, I'm sure, will state next month. The motion was not well thought out and more time is required, or perhaps he'll surprise us and maybe the newsletter gets out earlier than later. I mean, I'm trying to be objective. My glass is half full. I'm not.
I just don't know why we couldn't say 90 days. It just seemed more realistic, but.
It may have been, but, we'll find out. We'll do our best. That's all we can do. We always try to do our best.
Well, in 60 days, it's going to be brought back to this table and we'll talk about it again.
But we have
All right.
nothing to talk about in 60 days.
Well, hopefully, we're going to have some
If
feedback.
people call because of the plea that
There's
Mr.
nothing to
Maynard
talk
put,
about.
dial now, get a free Girl
People are
Girl Scout
watching.
cookie.
People are watching right now. We'll
All right, well, with the motion passed, so
Live.
that's the general manager's direction. So now's the time for,
The general manager's direction was not the motion. The motion was to the timetable for when you would discuss this
Okay.
again.
all right?
The general manager's direction is, what do you want me to tell the city manager of Los Alamitos?
Nothing at the moment. We're not going to consummate a contract, and we've not directed you to engage them in a discussion as their counteroffer. So the request from the board is to poll the community. You can do it via electronically, and/or you can do it via U.S. mail through a newsletter. If the newsletter is hypothetically due to go out July 15th, and because of this pressing issue tonight, is advanced for posting in the mail July 1st, and it helps accelerate the process. And if it doesn't meet the time frame set, we may only have electronic responses, and/or we may have the overture tonight being heard by those who watched on YouTube or some other source, that they will contact the RCSD and say, one is, I want that on broadcast channel 3, or I don't care, or there's no responses.
Well, I'm making a motion that we do not do the survey electronically. We do not gather our information electronically. I think it's ridiculous. we're sending up a survey to people who do not have the ability.
Well, that was understood when we made the motion, though.
No, but we're talking about it again, that it's their choice to do either electronic or whatever. And I think if we do an electronic survey on this to people who don't have computers, it's really, it smacks in there that we don't really want to gather the information.
I would still go through and get computer, because right now, we don't have any facts. Let's at least put something out there and get some response, because right now, we don't have any response, minus 3 people who are kind enough to step up here and tell us their point of view.
Let's suggest then, as an option to the newsletter, Liz is going to cost out for us what it would cost to do, what is it, Liz?
Like a direct mail piece
Postcard?
through Sir Speedy or one of those services, yeah.
A postcard like?
Okay.
Excellent.
It's going to be expensive as hell.
All right. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Rips?
Yeah.
All right, motion carries 10 nonetheless, 3-2. So we're going to get a report back within 60 days. So let's now move on. We've had no additional additions to our agenda other than
Additions.
B1, so now it's time for public forum. That's where the community can address the Board of Directors concerning matters in our subject jurisdiction. However, we're not permitted to take action, but we can direct staff at the board's discretion for report and action at another time. So if you come forward, if you have something to state, give us your first and last name and tell us what you'd like to talk about. You have 2 minutes. And if you can bring the microphone down so we can hear your nice voice, thank you. Speak up loud and you're yelling at your brother across the room.
I'm Sophia Bean, and I'm 9 years old in 4th grade. I live in Rossmoor. A week ago, I was at the Rossmoor Park across from our school, and I was climbing a tree with my friend Carly, and one of the park rangers came. We didn't know we weren't allowed to climb trees, so we were doing it because, well, we didn't know. But one of the park rangers came and told my mom that we weren't allowed to climb the trees. And so we got down, and now every time I go to the park, I always think, okay, so I'm gonna go climb a tree is the first thing I'm gonna do. But then I remember what happened, and I know that I can't do it. And as a kid, usually kids love to climb trees, even most kids do. And I can't because I live in a condominium, so I'm not allowed to climb trees there, and we can't climb trees at the park. And so I know it's for safety, but it's at the kid's risk of climbing. So if the kid wants to take the risk, then they can. And it's the same thing, like if you're riding a bike, you can fall off and still get hurt. And it's the same thing as like with swings on the park or like the monkey bars. You could fall off of them and like hurt yourself. And so I think it's kind of unfair that you can't climb trees, but you can do all those other things and still be at the same risk. And so I would kind of like to see well, I would kind of like it if you guys could consider maybe letting us climb trees again, and we just want to be kids and have fun.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Back up here. Greetings, Bill Howden, and as you know from the almost 3 years that I've been president of the RHA, you know my position in the community. Seems like a long time. I did want to come and give you some feedback from our community festival that we had this on Sunday. Express also some thank yous to your staff, Emily and Liz. Did a fantastic job. Emily worked with us. I think that made it a real team effort for us collectively in working together. And I I think when you were there, you could sense that this particular festival was one of the best ones we've had in years, if not the best. Some of the feedback we have, one of our food vendors, the Knights of the Holy Grail, came prepared for 650 meals. They ran out of food at 1 o'clock and had to go back after more. The vendors, our estimate, and again, just watching people come and go, whatever, is we may have had 1,200 to 1,500 people show up this year for our festival, which was just a really great attendance. The teamwork piece has helped tremendously, and we're still getting bugs out of that piece. And again, I think most of us are aware that with the exception of the incident we started off the day with the health department, it was a really great day. Health department issue is something that we tried to query in advance. Your staff, our staff, we never got the answers that we needed to get, and consequently, when they showed up, it created a little bit of a turmoil. Some of the food vendors that went home probably were justified in a sense that we had products for sale that were basically being displayed in the open air, and that's probably not according to standards. Some of the other extent was, I would have to agree with Assemblyman Silva, was bordering ridiculous. The American Legion was told that they couldn't give away Tootsie Rolls, and that was that. The motivation for this, we're not sure whether, it's hard time and people are getting money from any source they can. However, as I was thinking of this in reflection, sounds to me like the health department would come into our community on Halloween and make us all pay permits to hand out candy to kids. And I mean, that's the analogy that I would give in that situation that we had. So some of the things they had were okay, some of them not. We will be addressing that next year, and we think we have a solution to that, but it gives us a year. The main issue that we have with the health department is that we need them to be more responsive when we try to query them, and be somebody that we can work with in advance, as opposed to have them show up and just create the havoc that they did. Other than that, by the time that was done, we've done some PR work with some of the people that had some problems. We've refunded the money for people who had to pay for permits. We're offering some free advertising space for the people who had to leave in our newsletter. So we will be taking care of the PR aspects of whatever the problems were. But again, I really think that it was a great day, and I think the effect of both of our organizations working together the way we did throughout the year made it a good day for their community. So thanks. The other thing that I wanted to bring up too was announce that next week at our meeting at Rossmoor Park, we will be giving the checks out, handing the checks out for our high school scholarship recipients. We had 3 Los Alamitos High School seniors. Because of how we've changed with the publication, we've had more money available this year. The first place award was a $2,500 cash award. Second place was $1,000. The third place was $500. And so we made that a pretty significant amount of money. Following the news, some of our recipients have also earned other scholarships, so this will be adding to their trust fund as they go away to college. One of the things that we're considering as a result of this, having done it for a couple of years, is we're looking at adding potentially a high school senior to our board configuration so that we get a younger member of the community involved with our board actions. We believe if we start at the beginning of the year, so this will work through this and through next September as we start the school year, it will be good. The students get community service hours, and this would be a good way to do that and benefit our board by having a youth young participant in our board action, giving them some opportunity to experience some civic leadership. So we're working through the process now. It will be an experiment. We have no idea what kind of bugs we'll hit. We may hit some walls that say, no, this isn't feasible at all, but it's an idea how we want to do it. We want to involve the youth. One of the other facets of extending to the community at large is you'll notice in our newsletter we now have a kind of a puzzle that's for the young kids to hunt through, and they can do that. And that's a feature that we have. We've been fortunate that through our new arrangement for the publication of our newsletter, we're actually generating some additional money that can come back into the community, and so we've been successful with that. But again, overall, this has been good. Like I say, at the end, being the end of the third year of my tenure, I can say that we've made a lot of progress during that period of time. And as we look toward the next year, I'm hoping that we will continue with our good working relationship that we've had. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Good evening, members of the RCSD.
Good evening.
He just took my thunder away. I came to say thank you to everybody who did help us. And I was mainly in charge of the vendors. And if your vendors are happy, everybody's happy. And the vendors on a whole were very happy. Most of them made just enough money. Some of them, that's their whole living. But they made just enough money. A lot of them do want to come back again. And I've been doing this a number of years. A lot of these vendors are friends of mine. They have become friends over the years. And he was talking about the students who were a big help. And they did, all they got paid was a shirt that said staff and service hours. And I thought that was very good. And they were happy with that. And I just wanted to say, remember, we'll see you all again. It's always the first Sunday in May. People can't remember that. And now can I do another little commercial?
Sure.
This is for the Women's Club. I can't help it, I belong to too many organizations. On the 20th of May, we are doing our 9th annual garden tour. And the money we earn from that stays in the Los Alamitos School District, Seal Beach, Rossmoor, Los Alamitos. We have 7 lovely gardens at homes. The first year we did this, we only earned about $3,000 in that one day. And one home does have vendors at it as well. Last year, at our 8th annual, we earned $7,000. And this year we're going to go above and beyond. So please come support our club. And my number is 562-598-6360. And if anybody wants tickets, just call me up, because it's coming up shortly. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I typically come every month to field questions during public forum for Los Alamitos girls softball as the neighborhood liaison, but tonight I want to come and voice my opinion as a resident of Rossmoor. I didn't know Lieutenant Wren was going to be here tonight. It's going to piggyback on what I have to say. 20 years of public service, both with the police department and now the fire department. I've given that presentation to Long Beach City Council a few times that Lieutenant Wren did tonight, and the board let him off pretty easy tonight. He was here for about 10 minutes, and I want to bring up a couple things. My wife has asked me to look into calling ADT and Brinks Home Security because of the helicopters overhead, because of the emails we get from the RPMT every couple days about burglary in progress, vandalism report taken. When we moved into Rossmoor just under 4 years ago, we weren't expecting this. Has it gotten better? No. A couple quotes. I've written many reports. I've testified in court a few times. So I learned how to quote people very well. too many property crimes was the first thing that Lieutenant Wren said. So what are we going to do about too many property crimes? Increase in calls for service. Director Casey, I believe you asked about the calls for service, up from 268 to 442, and it was downplayed. Oh, it's people more familiar and calling and feeling comfortable calling. Really? What if 100 of those calls were for legitimate issues of people stalking a neighborhood, which is happening? So Lieutenant Wren got off easy on that one. He didn't really have to explain that one, but I've called the sheriffs 3 times in the past year, and my calls are extremely filtered. I have to definitely witness something that I've seen with my training that warrants a call. And most people in Rossmoor probably have never called 911 or the sheriffs. So for an increase in the number of records by that much should be an alarming number. I'm basically here, I don't want to continue on too much, but I'm asking for a request for action. In the fire department, when fire engine goes off and that station's empty and there's another call in the district, we call those colliding incidents. When the sheriff is in wherever, Cypress, on a kidnapping, Rossmoor's unprotected. And Director Maynard, you brought that up. And during those 14 minutes, an incident collided in Rossmoor and we had no protection. What should we do about that? What's the coverage in Rossmoor when a public agency will respond mutual aid to help any other law enforcement agency, obviously, in the area? A couple things he said that should raise a red flag. Dispatch call sitting for a minute and 16 seconds before they're being answered. 5-minute response time, which isn't too bad. We hit five minutes probably about 60% of the time in the fire department. There you're dealing with medical emergencies and it's a whole different ballgame. But those 2 incidents, 12-minute response time, 14-minute response time, are a result of calls colliding. If the officer, the deputy, took people to jail, who's here to protect us? Nobody. Who do we call? As a resident, I'm very concerned about that, and I feel as though this board should do something about that. I have an idea, but the lieutenant did say brazen thefts during the day. Is there anything scarier to a retired couple at home with a brazen theft, burglary of their house going on during the day? Was that happening? It could have been. It wasn't very specific, but it's happening. The criminals are getting brazen, and he admitted it. So I think the point I'm trying to make is we need additional coverage. I think the sheriff's doing an outstanding job. I wish we could have 2 or 3 of them, not just for calls colliding, but for visibility. Obviously, the bad guys are fully aware that when they see a sheriff going down Catella, oh, that might be the guy that covers Rossmoor. Let's go in and go see if there's a garage door open. He knows that the call time is going to be dramatically increased because he's out of the area. There are security firms that provide patrol, whether armed or unarmed, I'm not quite sure. But there are agencies out there that can be devoted to Rossmoor, that can patrol Rossmoor, that have a radio, that could be in contact with the sheriff department within the push of a button. It's an extra set of eyes, and they're not going to be leaving to go to a mutual aid in Cypress or kidnapping in Seal Beach or wherever that occurred. So I request this board to come up with some sort of a plan to abate this, because I don't want to, it's not my intent to buy a home security alarm for my house. I don't know how much they are, they're not cheap, but Rossmoor could probably split the cost of hiring a couple security officers dedicated to our welfare in the community. It'd definitely be something that I would want to see in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close public forum. I'm going to move this board to, Mr. Burgess, want to come up real quick?
Dave Burgess. I don't recall the gentleman's name, but he has some valid points. I think maybe, not maybe, but the math is if you have a lot of robberies that are occurring during the day. Burglaries, sorry, apologize. You know, for, I don't know, $35 an hour, you might get an unarmed guard, just another person in the area with access apparently to the police department. It's like $250 a day, $1,200 a week, you know, 52 is like $65,000. It's probably worth looking into.
Thank you.
And then I see in the minutes that Paradigm is going to assume the architect role, and I assume they're going to kind of take on the responsibilities of the prior person. And I urge the board and the city manager and the architect to take a real more common sense look at it, and really spend the time and talk to people about the feasibility of it, if it makes sense. If there's something major going on construction-wise, that we have someone, and maybe it's, I think her name is Cheryl, maybe she's attending that, you know, during the construction, like that tennis court disaster I went and looked at today, the concrete separating. It was not well managed. And I'm not saying by the city or the Rossmoor community, but just we need someone to oversee these construction projects and take more common sense out of it, take a more common sense approach, excuse me, about where we're going, you know. And then as far as disclosure at the meetings, I think maybe a 5-minute financial presentation about what we spent last month on capital improvements, what were the issues, can't go into a half-hour discussion about a swing set being installed, but just a general, you know, 2-sentence discussion. We spent $25,000 doing this last month. We're going to spend $50,000 doing this next month. And I think if you have those kind of discussions, you'll get more people maybe talking to about the meetings. And last point, I have many, but I'll stop. I understand that people want to get up and talk at the meeting. Maybe they, you know, they want to go home at 8 o'clock at night for personal reasons or whatever. But there's so much covered during the agenda that triggers in my mind, but I don't feel comfortable coming up at 8:45 and reopening the public discussion. But there's a lot of information that's talked about, like the YouTube on the broadcast, et cetera. So I really think that we ought to consider moving the public forum later on in the agenda. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that's the only other gentleman or person that wanted to address this during public forum, so we will close public forum. I was going to state a moment ago, I'd like to, with the board's permission and the consensus, that we move item H2, which deals with the discussion of Paradigm Designs, the proprietors here, and rather than wait until later in the evening, given the agenda set before us, we may be here till 10 o'clock or later tonight.
Perfect.
Sure. Do we have a consensus to move that up? All right. Mr. Troutwater, would you like to move H2 up? And we have Ms. Williams here.
Yes, sir. H2 agenda item is the engagement of architectural consultant for the district's capital improvement program. As you know, for several years now, we've engaged the services of the Conklin Group to be our architectural consultant and to also be the eyes and ears of the district with regard to project management, because we have no one on staff who does project management for a living or as a discipline. Mr. Conklin tendered his resignation several months ago, and I was given direction by the board then to secure the services of someone else to take on that role. The board made two recommendations. I interviewed both people. The one individual who I interviewed was a non-resident who lived in Orange and worked in South Orange County. The individual that I'm recommending to you this evening, Ms. Cheryl Williamson, is known to the community and is technically and otherwise qualified to take on this role. And there's a proposal before you for an hourly rate for services that is ordinary and customary for this particular discipline. And I urge your vote to approve the acquiring the services of Ms. Cheryl Williamson to be the district's consultant for architectural and project management work. Ms. Cheryl Williamson is in the audience if you'd like to bring her up, or if you just if you have questions.
Mr. Casey, you want to start off? You have any questions?
Well, I've reviewed her credentials, and they seem fairly comparable to Mr. Conklin in terms of the types of things that she will provide to the community versus what he was doing in terms of getting the plans approved, getting the proper permitting and the like. So Mr. Tabata is part of what you reviewed. Would you say that's true in terms of comparable services, in your opinion, for what you would provide to us?
Well, I think the two firms are comparable and will provide the same level or better service than we're used to receiving. And I feel very comfortable in making this recommendation to the board.
Well, I've reviewed her credentials, and I was quite impressed with the strength of the background in terms of what it appears are her capabilities. So
well, the real advantage is to someone who lives in the community and who is active in the community. Ms. Williamson is a member of the RPC. Is that they can hit the floor running. There is no orientation with regard to the culture and this board and this staff as to what our how we operate and what our expectations are. And I think she's a good fit.
yeah, that seems to be true to me also.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind, sir.
Not at all.
First of all, are you representing Paradigm Design, Adapt Architecture? Who am I looking at here? Because I see...
Ms. Williamson has a dual role. She's an independent consultant herself. She has her... Yes, she's right here.
Can she speak for herself?
Yes, sure.
And I'd love to talk to her.
Ms. Williamson, come
Unless
on.
you have to speak for her.
She's hard to see back there.
We can go through you, Mr. Tabawat, if that's all right.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Williamson, resident of Rossmoor for 11 years.
Hi, great. Perfect. Very impressive resume. Tell me, though, 29 years professional experience working with corporate America. What is your experience dealing with the County of Orange, particularly?
In terms of, you mean as in an architectural capacity?
Yeah, I believe that's what we're going to be
Yes.
contracting you to do, right? So that's all I'm concerned about tonight.
Yes, I work with the County of Orange in their building department, health department, and planning and zoning, as well as the Orange County Fire Authority. And I work primarily in doing residential work in terms of, there's not a lot of commercial work going on right now in residential, in architectural terms for my interfacing with Orange County. But I've been dealing with them for over 11 years because I worked with them in other capacities in other communities.
Now, are you an architect yourself?
I am not licensed in the state of California. I am licensed in Arizona. And for the portions of this job where you're going to need a licensed architect, which would be for the completion of construction documents, the project management aspect, the facilities management aspect, the supervision of construction projects, that sort of thing, the architecturally administrative work, you do not need a licensed architect for that in the state of California. So in the areas where you're going to need the completion of architectural construction documents, that would be under my partner in Adapt Architecture. My experience has been, in the past 22 years that I've lived in California, that most of my clients, residential and commercial, do not wish to pay for the full fees of a fully licensed architect for all things where it's not required. And that's why I presented this in a kind of two-stage effect, as it were. so that you have the advantage or the opportunity to use a lower fee structure where you don't need a fully licensed architect for the things that I previously described. And then where you do need a fully licensed architect, then I will give you a quote for the job on a per-job basis based on the scope of work.
All right.
Does that make sense? And I also offered in my letter to Mr. Talbota that I would prefer to offer you guys a fixed fee for anything where you have a scope of work, because nobody likes to work carte blanche with just an open hourly rate, and I respect that, especially in this economy.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just who did you say would actually do the licensed architecture work?
His name is Anthony D'Agostino. He's a partner of mine at Adept Architecture.
So you're a principal at Adept Architecture as well?
Yes, I am.
And I didn't catch his last name. Is Anthony
D'Agostino?
D'Agostino. He's a licensed California architect,
Yes, he is.
and he's done significant work with residential structures in Orange County, state and the state of California.
He doesn't do a lot of residential work. I do a lot of residential work under Paradigm Design, which is my firm that I own. And Anthony does a lot of commercial work. So in the instances where we're talking about park structures, for example, park buildings, public buildings, those are considered commercial construction.
And who do you folks use for your civil engineering work?
It depends on the particular job. I have a local civil engineer that I like working with residentially, who does a lot of work in Leisure World, and his offices are up in the, I would call the Cypress area. Bob Gilbert.
I'm familiar with that person. Does good work.
Pardon me?
I'm familiar with the person. He does good work.
Oh, thank you. I like him. He has common sense, street smarts. Any other questions?
Mr. Taboada, your primary recommendation here for this individual is that she's a member of the community? That was your primary motivation for this recommendation?
Well, it's certainly, the fee structure is certainly attractive. The qualifications are certainly attractive. The fact that she knows the community is super, attractive. There's a real advantage to someone who knows this community and who knows Orange County. I mean, to get a combination of those two together is really the best I could hope for.
In a lot of ways, this job description is what I would call facilities management. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 10 years doing corporate facilities management. So you're interfacing with a lot of different committees. You're interfacing with a lot of different members of the community, or in the case of corporate facilities management, corporate members who have different agendas and different perspectives on things. So that, I think, is a strong card in my favor in terms of it's a little bit like that, just scaled down from a Fortune 500 company.
One other consideration for me was that working for an individual who has a job to do which requires architectural work is far different than working for a body such as this. And while very few architects get to do work with political bodies, Ms. Williamson has done work with church groups who have similar boards as this board and has to reach consensus with the projects that's being proposed, the cost, the design, all of the elements that go into getting a whole group of people to get on the same page. And that, I think, is another thing that I see as a real advantage.
I just, my personal feelings that I wish I was dealing, no offense, Mrs. Williamson, I wish I was dealing directly with the architect and not an intermediary to get to the architect in such a small community, but that's just a personal preference.
I don't see that the majority of the projects you're actually going to need to pay the fee for a California licensed architect to be involved in things like project management, facilities management, bid administration, that sort of thing. And I thought that you would appreciate that I offer a less expensive solution with 29 years of experience.
Anyone else? No. All right. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I motion that we authorize the general manager to engage the services of Paradigm Design Systems for architectural control.
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion? All right, call, Mr. Rips, I'm sorry.
No.
And I didn't want to cut you off, yes, I'm sorry. All right, all in favor of the motion as framed, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Rips, did you vote?
I didn't, sorry.
You did not?
I did not vote.
Or abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. All right, we have one abstention, one nay, motion carries 3 out of 5. Congratulations, Ms. Williamson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Taboada, let's proceed now then, please, with D1, reports to the board. The first one is the Investments Committee report.
Mr. President, members of the board, the Investment Committee met in December of 2011 and made several recommendations for the district's investments, which were then approved by the board. Consequently, the market took a real turn in terms of our ability to meet those investment objectives that were set forth by both the committee and the board. So on April 19th of 2012, the committee met again to review the current status of the market and what to do with not maturing, but matured investments that were now that needed to be dealt with. The previous recommendations of the investment committee were deferred because of that market conditions that had changed so dramatically. And based on these developments, the committee was asked to meet again and revisit previously approved investment directions to the general manager. And after discussion, the committee voted to make recommendations to the board as follows. Invest $250,000 in LAIF until such time as market conditions improve. This is as a result of a $100,000 and a $150,000 investment in CDs that matured in the early months of this calendar year. The other recommendation was to invest one half of the Fund 20 reserve account in the amount of $362,770 in a U.S. agency note for a term of 1 year. And the third recommendation was to invest the other half of the Fund 20 reserve account in the same amount, $362,770, and a U.S. agency note for a term of 2 years. And these three recommendations were based on your policy and your limitations on the reserve account as to what kind of investment activity those can be invested in. We're asking you to approve these recommendations, and keeping in mind that yield and interest rates are subject to change on a daily basis, which may alter real-time investments. And the committee's agenda report is attached for your reference, and it goes into great detail about the current investment structure for the district and what the current investments are. That's my report.
Mr. Rips, you want to start off if you have any comments?
I have a question. I guess it's on page 15 of 185, which is number 2 of this section, I guess. I'm just trying to make sure I understand where the $362,770 is in Fund 20 reserve account.
It's a required reserve that is part of the bond covenants for the Rush Park acquisition by the district.
I'm just looking at the balances as of 4/1/12, and maybe I misunderstood, but it sounded to me like you said we were going to invest two $362,770 investments.
No, it's one half. It was one half of that amount. It is a one-year investment and one half as a 2
Okay, so one half of the total. The total
yes.
is, okay, that's
Yeah,
what
I'm
I
sorry if I
misunderstood.
misled you on that.
That's okay. I thought I misunderstood. I just wanted clarification. Okay. And then so the money that goes into LAIF is we can pull out when needed, correct, for cash flow purposes?
You can pull it out tomorrow by 10 o'clock in the morning, and we can have it in the bank for reinvestment in any instrument that yields a better rate than what we're getting with LAIF.
And the monies that are being put into these notes for 1 year and 2 years would be
the best market rate available.
But they would be locked up for that time, is that correct?
That's correct. But the market is unlikely to change for the next 2 years.
I'm just questioning cash flow, not investment.
Well, that really is not part of our cash flow because that is a required investment that's held by U.S. Bank.
Okay. That's just one of the clarifications.
No, I'm just
That's good.
trying
I
to be-
wasn't questioning the investment.
No.
I understand we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, so, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Minner?
No, I think this is a very safe approach with 250,000 exceptionally liquid. And obviously, I'm on the committee, and that's why, so I'm part of what's presented here, so, yeah.
There aren't many options available.
Yeah.
Can't take risks, can't do that, I mean, it's
Yeah.
very
This can't do that, so.
I'm on the committee too, and when we looked at it, it was just like,
Yeah.
what else can we, there was nothing to do. It's like, oh, great, this is the only option.
You guys aren't very creative, are you?
Well, the
I'm
No,
just
it's
teasing.
not us. It's
pork bellies, maybe.
your hands are tied, and you really can't do anything at
Right.
the state, so.
We did talk about going into derivatives, another,
This isn't the county of Orange, we're not going to go there. We're gonna-
Mr. Casey, any comment?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first one, and I'm sure I should have been aware of this, but the CD that we voted back in December, I think it was a $150,000 CD that matured on 1/11/2012.
yes.
The interest rate in December, about 3 weeks before the due date, the 1% must have dropped significantly in the 3-week period between then and when that CD matured.
It actually didn't. The board and the committee recommended that we invest in a CD of at least 1% if it was available. And there are some CDs that you can get in weird markets that might get you that return, but it's not one you would want to invest your money in. So what was available was a much lower rate of return.
Well, I was on the committee at that time. I don't remember that caveat. But if that was the decision that was made, that if it was anything below 1%, we weren't going to do it, I guess that's why no action was taken at that time. And it was left in LAIF instead of a CD at that time. Is that true?
When it matured, it went automatically into LAIF until you approved these new recommendations.
Okay. Well, moving on, the second point is our financial advisor doesn't seem to like item F on our list of investments, bond fund. That was another item back in December that the committee was asking for part of the monies to be put into a bond fund. And it seems like any time our financial advisor looks at what we suggest, he feels that's far too aggressive for what our investment structure is. I mean, which is fine, but I'm sort of wondering why we have that on the list of potential investments when, his philosophy is not to do it.
Well, he doesn't determine what your policy is.
Right.
Your policy is based on what is permissible under law for the district to invest in. And so you have about A to Z, I think, or A to G or something like that in your policy that says you can do any one of those types of investments.
Of course.
His advice to you is based solely on his belief and that of his client group that governments typically do not invest in something that risks the principal. And the bond fund that you were looking at does risk principal. Everything that you've invested in since I've been here has been on a no-risk investment, such as a CD or...
Oh, certainly. Most always we invest in CDs as opposed to any of these other instruments.
But you've purchased GE stock or bonds. You've done other investments, but with a secure principal. Now, the interest rate may drop off, but your principal has never been at risk in anything that you've invested in, at least during the last 6 years. And what he's saying to you is, if you want to invest in this, that's strictly a policy option for this board to consider. But his advice is none of his clients go into that market because it does risk principal.
Okay, well, if our committee, voted to go in the direction of conservatism, so be it. That's fine. No other comments.
All right, we have 3 recommendations tonight. Which one will anyone frame as the recommendation of the 3 that we move to adopt?
I have to adopt all of them as a group.
All as a group?
Yes.
That's-
I think so, yes, I think so.
Because Mr. Talbota said or.
Oh.
It was disjunctive form, and
Did you?
If I did, I misspoke.
No,
Yeah,
so-
that's what I
Anyway,
thought.
I'd like to frame a
glad we're all
motion.
on the same page.
Yes.
Okay,
I'd like to frame,
so, anyone want to frame a motion?
I'd like to frame a motion that we adopt recommendations 1, 2, and 3 found on page 11 of 185 in our board meeting minutes for the evening.
And I will second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No one opposes, motion carries 5-0. Next is D2.
Mr. President, members of the board, D2 is a committee report of the Public Works CIP Committee with their review of the fiscal year 2011-2012 capital improvement projects and recommended project lists and proposed 2012-2016 capital improvement budgets. Public Works Committee, CIP Committee, met on April 19th to review the current state of the district's 2011-2012 CIP project list and Fund 40 budget. The committee also reviewed the staff's recommended fiscal year 2012-2016 capital improvement program budgets and project lists for inclusion with the 2012-2013 preliminary budget. The recommendations of the committee are based on current budget revenue estimates and a thorough review of the district's capital needs. The committee concurred with staff's recommendation that until the April property tax apportionments were received and a new architectural consultant was brought on board, that this year's projects be deferred until next fiscal year. It was pointed out, however, that when these issues are resolved, that the project list and budget for the Fund 40 may be revisited during the board's review of the preliminary budget in the months of June and July, or perhaps even August. Attached are the agenda committee reports, and their recommendations are included within the budget for next fiscal year, which is the next agenda item.
Any comments?
I like what you're doing. I have a question on one item, and it's not really related to the philosophy behind this, but there was an item on page 29 where the original estimate for the permanent shade structure was $39,000. And if I read this correctly, I think we've gotten 2 estimates for doing that project, one for like $10,170 and the other one for $13,000 and something. Is that true? Am I interpreting that correctly?
I believe you are. And the reason for that is the type of construction for these shade structures. If you build one like we have now with the poles and the canvas, you can do that for practically nothing. Then there are other structures which are more substantial, but would not meet perhaps the county's wind test. For instance, the county's requirement for a structure, a permanent structure, as we envision, is like 90 miles an hour.
Oh, I read 60, but maybe,
okay,
yeah.
Yeah, it could be 60.
Okay.
So, it just depends on the quality and the requirements of the county when it comes to actually making a decision on what kind of a structure you would build.
Okay, well, I mean, we're not really voting on doing this tonight, but
Oh, no.
Is it, I guess it's the opinion maybe of yours that those estimates for doing that will provide a high-quality shade structure?
Well, we won't know that until we actually bring something forward to the committee to vote on and then take
All
it
right.
to the county for their requirements for that specific.
Sure. Yeah, I know it's premature, but I just wanted to garner as much information as I could, as long as, it's before us.
When you ask for a quote, you're going to get a dollar quote, and until you actually go out and see one in some place that's how it's built, how it's constructed, you're really, you can't tell much from a.
So you were just teasing us with those two?
Oh, no, those
All
are,
right.
those are reasonable quotes. It's just that until we actually physically look at the product and test it ourselves at some other location, get input from some other community who's built one of these, that's what we bring you back then, a firm recommendation on what we would like for you to consider.
All right, fair enough. One other thing, it's on the same page. The Rossmoor mini structure walls, it's saying somebody named Tom completed a mock-up. I'm not sure who Tom is.
Tom's our, what's his title? He's maintenance assistant.
Do you have a last name? Or is that his last name?
Yeah, Thackerson, Thomas Thackerson. Keep in mind that this is an internal report.
Okay.
This is not, and we've given it to you for, as background for.
Okay, that's fine.
But it's not something that we publish for the public, except in this case. So I get a weekly report like this, which you never see.
No, I understand.
We know who Tom is.
Yes, you do. Thank you. That's my only questions.
My turn? I am full of questions tonight. So on page 28 of 185, CIP weekly update, week of April 9th, I look at Rush Park, second item down, and I see baseball field.
Right.
Item 3, replaced with dustless dirt.
Yes,
And now we're speaking about this field that's right out here,
correct.
Rush Park, and where is the request coming to replace with dustless dirt? What like organization needs to have dustless dirt? Is that softball, is that baseball?
This is a recommendation of your CIP committee who put this on the project list.
Okay.
And I would, if you want to know what the genesis,
CIP.
if you want to know what the genesis is, the board president appointed a committee to negotiate an MOU
Right.
with the LAGSL and the Rossmoor Park Neighborhood Group. Part of those negotiations and discussions centered on moving games off of Rossmoor Park onto Rush Park
Right.
to alleviate some of the congestion, noise, and traffic at Rossmoor Park. The only way to do that would be to upgrade this field here to be able to play more games at Rush Park than at Rossmoor than are currently being played today.
I see, okay.
And that's the genesis of why it's on this project list. It's keeping faith with that negotiation with which this board adopted the MOU, which included that
Right.
as one of the provisions of the MOU.
Okay. So that's the case, and I understand that I would suggest that we replace that terminology from replace to scrape and rebuild with some type of dustless field, because what you're really suggesting is remove the grass infield that's
Oh,
here
absolutely.
and take it down a foot or 18 inches or whatever, put it in with a particular soil and push it out beyond the base pass. So it's much more involved than just replacing existing dirt. It's a bigger project. So,
You realize this is just a weekly update from April
This
9th?
is an internal
It's not
report, it's not a recommendation.
yeah, but
it's
I'm
not
also
a
saying that in the
scope of
Fund 40
service.
improvement projects adjusted budget, so it's a little bit more than just a little report when it's sitting in a budget here.
Okay, I mean, it is
Like
also,
otherwise, it would just be a summary like email, hey, we're just thinking
it
about
is also recommended that we push all these in this fiscal year,
Yeah.
so, I mean, if you want to
Yeah.
go through item by item, that's great, but it's
No,
not anything.
I'm not going to do item by item. I'm just saying that's $35,000 is kind of a substantial amount to have
You're
on
right.
on like dockets. I just wanted to
And it still needs to be discussed and brought back to the board, and it hasn't yet.
make sure that's on the
No.
table. That's all.
It's,
Your turn? I'm sorry, I mean, you had a lot of
I'm-
comments.
that's-
a lot of
that's all.
questions. So I-
Do you have more, Bill?
No, I'm all done.
Okay.
Wait a
Again,
minute.
for
Wait a
what,
minute. I'm just kidding.
for what this is, I believe we're making the right recommendations. Obviously, we know we have a cash flow situation of when we get the funding. Heavy amount in April. We haven't received it yet.
We have now.
We have now. Good.
Yes, we have. That's in
Are you
your,
feeling better?
it's what we got last year.
Okay.
Which is good news.
Yeah, it's not less. That's good in these days. So, so now we can at least bring it back up to the CIP committee, now that we have an architectural consultant and we actually have some funding. Now's the time for us,
Yes.
Jeffrey, to get back together with the CIP committee and make real recommendations to the board besides, let's wait for the cash.
That's why I recommended that you could revisit this next month,
Yes.
July, or even into August if you wanted to carry the budget adoption to that level. So you have plenty of time to revisit any of these
Of course.
project lists.
Mr. Rips, any comments?
No.
I have a couple comments, one of which deals with the signage proposed to take place as soon as the architectural project management person was retained. I believe that given there's a facade, and this has come up probably in the last 90 days at least, where we discussed this. In fact, Mr. Maynard made a very constructive comment to suggest we put this on the table for possible implementation, but I was wondering why we couldn't put a dollar value just as a placeholder, like we did with the canopy. The canopy costs, if we were to consummate an agreement tonight, it's far less than $39,000, and I was wondering why a swag couldn't have been made for the three micro signage facades.
Well, at the moment, we don't have a full cost of what that is. We only know what the construction cost is. We don't know what the permitting is. We don't know if we need electrical permits. We don't know what else we need in order to get that off the ground. I have direction from this board to make it happen, and it's as soon as Ms. Williamson is on board tomorrow, we can begin. We're moving ahead with that project because I have board direction to do so. So the budget is, if it's not a line item in your budget, you have a fund balance within that budget of substantial amount to be able to carry this project off.
I just felt that this is something like $20,000 was overkill for this project. That's where I'm coming from. I don't think this is anything advanced as far as what we've already done. So that's why I make the comment. So I'll accept what you say, but I'd like to see as soon as possible some swag. Ms. Williamson is now engaged as officially a few moments ago. If we can get a report back very soon and get us a rough estimate on that. And then with regards to the comment you made, Mr. Tabawada, about the MOU, I was very concerned about our discussions months ago about the MOU and possible discussions of any work on the field as a inducement for the parties to come together. And the reason I was concerned is that it was done in a vacuum. It wasn't done with the consensus of all 5 members. It was done by those that were part of the committee to engage LAGSL in discussion. So to repeat that tonight as the basis for this placeholder, I just want to reserve my reticence to even suggest that this was something that the other 4 members or 3 members were part of.
I just want to clarify a little bit. I mean, the field was definitely not the impetus for the conversation about with the MOU. It did come out of conversations within the MOU, and all I did was commit that I would bring it back to the CIP committee. I reiterated to that group that I was one of 5 and that the board would have to make a decision at some point whether they wanted to move forward or not, but that I would commit to bring it as part of that process. And that's what we're doing. I mean, it hasn't really even come to a really thorough conversation within the CIP committee, and it hasn't been brought to the board. And
not to cut you off, I recognize, but I also know what Mr. Chabot has stated, and what I'm saying here is some people can take it out of context.
Okay.
And there's what we call in the legal community detrimental reliance, as a term of art is saying, but you promised.
Right.
But there's a misunderstanding, so I'm just cautioning that reservation I have because of that out there.
Right. I think it was very, just so you know, I think it was very clear in those meetings that what the
Well, I take
commitment
your word
was
on
and
it.
what the.
I take your word on that,
Yeah.
but,
Mr.
you know, it's like, you know, someone commenting in Mr. Maynard's ear and it comes to my ear.
Of course.
By the time it comes out of Mr. Casey's ear, it might be have 50% of what was spoken.
And that would be a good thing.
Mr. President, members of the
There
board,
you go, that's what
It depends on which ear you're actually talking to on Mr. Casey, so that's
Yeah, my left ear is better than
It
my
does.
right ear, but.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is not unlike the other agenda item, which is further on in your agenda, on the restructuring of the board's policies for the use of athletic fields, facilities, and buildings. That also was a discussion point of the MOU process, and one that was brought to this board by members of the community who asked this board to look at restructuring those board policies. I don't see much difference between this and the field. It's just one more element of a community-driven process to bring attention to the board of things that are of interest to them. And as Director Rips points out, no promises were made. Only thing we said was that we would bring it to the board for their discussion. And you're not adopting this budget as a fait accompli. You will adopt each project as it comes to
No, I understand.
your attention.
I know. I recognize that. All right, so you're looking for some direction this evening?
No, sir, you're just going to receive this because it's just a preliminary part of developing the preliminary budget. So what the committee recommends is now included as part of our recommended preliminary budget, which is your next agenda item.
Okay. All right, then, no further comments. Mr. Casey, you have something else?
No, nothing further.
Okay. All right, we'll move to D3.
That was a receive and file?
Yes.
Unanimous?
And if it's a report, then it's just receive and file, right?
Mr. President, members of the board, item D3 is the Budget Committee's report regarding the proposed fiscal year 2012-2013 preliminary budget and the annual salary plan for the district. So in accordance with board policy, I presented a proposed preliminary budget to the Budget Committee. Further, we developed estimates to close prior to April 30th, which is also part of your budget calendar and your policy on the proposed budget. You will note that our estimates indicate that your fiscal year 2011-2012 final budget will close with approximately $36,988 of budgeted revenue over budgeted expenses. Next year's budget will once again have a beginning and fund balance for each fund, and the board will have the option of reallocating ending fund balance monies to other funds as a function of the adoption by resolution to that effect. The CIP committee has reviewed and has made recommendations for the four-year CIP. And keep in mind that the board will only be approving the first-year budget of the CIP, and future years' budget documents are estimates only. The proposed preliminary budget as reviewed by the Budget Committee is primarily based on known trends or estimates with a high probability of accuracy. Again, this year, there are substantial unknown elements resulting from the state's and the county's ongoing budget process. Moreover, at the time of the Budget Committee meeting, the property tax apportionments for April had not been received. Now that they have arrived, DTCs and proposed revenue have been adjusted accordingly. Based on these uncertainties, the preliminary budget for Fund 10, 20, and 30 are basically flat budgets for both revenue and expenditures. Should actual state and county budget impacts become known prior to the approval of the final budget, the board could deal with those in July or even August by resolution. So after your initial review this evening, the preliminary budget and salary plan with amendments, if any, will be resubmitted at your June meeting for further review. Also, Fund 40 remains structured as a four-year capital improvement program. The four-year format is to account for sizable future projects such as the repaving of the Rush Park parking lot, which requires a large capital expenditure. The Budget Committee has recommended that the district seriously consider moving the parking lot project into the next fiscal year with debt financing as a means to pay for it. Input from the Public Works CIP Committee on recommended priorities, costing of the first-year projects, as well as other inputs from the Budget Committee is factored into the preliminary budget. It is rather certain that capital projects contemplated for this fiscal year will not use up the entire budgeted amount. Consequently, the ending fund balance for this year's capital program will be approximately $196,367. However, in order to maintain the momentum of our four-year CIP, it is also recommended a transfer from Fund 20 of $100,000 to Fund 10 as payment for back administrative costs be approved. It is further recommended that a like amount be transferred from Fund 10 to Fund 40. This will result in the beginning fund balance in Fund 40 of $296,367. This should ensure a viable continuation of the multi-year program and allow for costing out future projects with a reasonable expectation of completing them. At your June meeting, the board will be asked to approve a notice for publication stating that the general manager is preparing a proposed final budget and that the final budget will be available for inspection specifying date, time, and place when the board will meet and adopt the budget. In conclusion, the Public Works CIP Committee has previously reviewed and revised the proposed CIP, and Budget Committee has reviewed the ETCs and the proposed budget and evaluated other program costs, such as a salary plan. It is recommended that the board receive both documents and direct the general manager to bring these documents back at your June meeting with any revisions for further review and input from the community. Attached to the agenda reports presented to the committee with budget detail for your review. That's my report, Mr. President, members of the board.
Let me go back to page 47 of 185. Can I take you back there? Let me start out on this one. The last paragraph. You state that, however, in order to maintain the momentum for this four-year capital improvement program, you're recommending the transfer of $100,000 from Fund 20.
That's correct.
To Fund 10 as payment as for back administrative costs that we, by advice of counsel and the auditor, we could do, which basically is $20,000 a year over the course of 5 years, which comes up with $100,000, correct?
Correct.
All right. Then you state, it is further recommended that a like amount be transferred from Fund 10 to Fund 40. So taking the $100,000 from, that you shifted from 20 through 10 to 40, correct?
I wouldn't state it quite that way because...
Well, then how would you state it?
Well, it's a legal transfer from Fund 20 to
Sounds
Fund...
like we're washing money.
Well, it's a legal transfer from Fund 20 to Fund 10. What you do with Fund 10 then, back to Fund 40, is also a legal transfer for capital projects. I would not characterize this as a pass-through. It just happens to be a like amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that $100,000 could be used for a multitude of purposes.
Absolutely.
This is one suggestion, right?
Sir? That's the staff's recommendation, and the committee has basically made the similar recommendation.
Okay. All right, thank you for taking the time to answer that. I'll open up to anybody else.
I just have a comment. The report was very well done. I just have a comment on, I think it's agenda item C1, which is like one of the references. And there's a statement on, I think it's page 3 at the top of the page.
What's the bottom number? What's the page number?
Bottom number, well, it's page 3, and it says 51 of 185.
That's sequential number, yes.
Okay, so that's important to you. In about the third sentence on that page, the statement is that the report states that housing prices are now at the highest level since 2007. And that just doesn't seem right to me.
That's been reported extensively in the business sections of the news media for the last couple of months.
Well, the housing market's doing a lot better than I thought it was.
Well, there's two things that's going on here. The housing numbers, that is, the transfer of housing, has dramatically increased. The price of the houses has not. So there's an offset of, how do I say that, of market improvement.
So you're saying the number of homes that have passed hands,
Correct.
whether through foreclosure or auction or legitimate retail sales, has kept people in that business busy because of transactions, but the cost of homes has dramatically departed from what it once was at its peak.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not the way I interpreted the sentence, but that's fine now that you've explained, the meaning behind it. And I guess the only significant thing is in terms of the revenues that derive from that, where I think it's stated that it just shows just a moderate decrease.
Well, the indicator that I use is...
Top of that page.
The indicator I use, regardless of what you read in the newspaper or hear on television, is
Sure.
what is our revenue from property taxes?
Oh, absolutely.
And our property tax revenue has been stable for the last 3 or 4
Right.
years. So it hasn't increased dramatically at all, but it's stable. And that's been the best that we could hope for, I think, in this
Yeah,
economy.
right. I think you said a moderate decrease, which is what's stated at the top of the page, and that's the most important part of all. I do agree. That's all I have.
One of the items that was discussed was the parking lot, and Mr. Tabuada did mention it. And it really came to a sort of a focal point of the conversation when it was shared about the investment committee and how low our investments are. So the conversation went, if our investments are so low, and we need to fix the parking lot, and it's going to have to be debt financed, then perhaps we should be looking at debt financing sooner rather than later, because also interest rates for loans are going to be at a low right now. And so
That would make sense.
that was why it was kind of said, maybe we could do it in 2 or 3 years, but if we do it now and save the community a lot of money on interest that we might have to pay, because no matter when we do it, we're probably going to have to go through debt financing to make this happen. That was why it was said that we should do it sooner rather than later.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge item, obviously.
Yeah, well, if you just think about it, and just to go extrapolate on what you're talking about, if we're looking at a quote of $400,000 to redo the parking lot, which is roughly what it is over like a 2-year period. I mean, if interest rates now are at 1 or 2%, and we put it off 2, 3, 4 years, what if that interest rate goes up to 4% or 5%? Then yeah, we push it off for 2 or 3 years, but inadvertently we may have cost the community a couple, 2% of interest, and it has to be fixed anyway. So it's a real interesting discussion that we have to make as a board. How it's like, if you have to paint the fascia in your house, do you do it now or do you wait 2 years? I mean, you still have to do it. It's not going to paint itself. It's not magically going to get better.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm not saying I want to spend I want to spend a lot of money, but if we're being fiscally prudent, it's a discussion that at least has to be on the table, and we have to at least say we would rather not do it, and at least we know that we're not going to do it, and we're going to pass on that interest rate.
My concern is that we could pay for this if we wanted to, but we'd have to forego other capital improvements.
Oh, yeah.
That are a much lesser amount of money.
Yep.
You have 400,000.
Reserves. We have unrestricted reserves.
Yeah.
And so it's a discussion here. I'm not.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
If we got to invest, we're very, very limited. We're not going to make the returns we made years ago. We hope to in the near future, but that isn't a reality. We do have an enviable reserve. We could pay for it cash and not go into debt financing. But it needs to be said, because it is feasible. It is that the view is if we expend $400,000, say 2012, 2013, that some of these other discussions on the table for capital improvement project, which,
For several years, not just for 1 year.
could be pushed back. For example, Montecito's already been delayed.
Mhm.
It's been suggested in the documents we reviewed thus far, and also in this attachment, that it's in piecemeal. Wanting to reduce the shock value, if you will, of the cost. And there's other projects that don't even come close. They're probably at what, under 50,000, most of them? So it all depends on how you look at it. So I just throw that out there for discussion. I'm not opposed to debt financing.
Yeah.
I agree, financing is probably at its optimal time. I've never seen anything in my lifetime from an adult to where I had my eye on the ground. I was observing these things to the current date. I think it's phenomenal what the interest rates are available. Maybe we are foolish to even to snicker at such a comment. But I just want to put it out there that it is true we are in an enviable position. We do have a good reserve.
Mr. President, members of the board, let me remind you what happened when you spent $495,000 in debt reduction for Rush Park. We were strapped for cash because you have a pooled cash account. So when you pull out that kind of money out of reserves, you lose that ability to blend your budget on a 12-month basis as opposed to the dips and valleys of your revenue. So,
But there's one thing that was attached to that, and that is the interest rate. It was a prudent buy down given the return. And so the board agreed to do that. Here it's a little bit different.
well, that was a good decision. I don't question the
was,
decision.
yes.
I'm just saying to you that just because you have a healthy reserve, that's what you use to level off your fluctuation in revenue against fixed expenses on a 12-month basis. It really does limit your ability to function as if you pull out that kind of money. Obviously, you could do a combination of debt financing and cash financing as a way to blend the two into something that would not be as burdensome, if you will, on your cash flow. So there are ways to do it. The question is, these projects that you now have on your project list, I always, when people always talk about reducing taxes, they always forget that every dollar has a constituency.
Has a what?
A constituency.
It does.
Lucky for us, we don't have to make a decision of debt or redeploy investments. I think most of us are, I think we're very safe the way that Bernanke keeps talking, that I don't see any change in interest rates of a major consideration happening in the next 6 months.
I agree.
So we're not pressed to make a tough decision, and that's the good news.
I will have for you, though, by your next meeting, a professional cost
That'll be good.
of the project. So you'll know what you're faced with today.
It'll lead to a very interesting discussion, I think.
Well, we have as well your proposal as to how we would pay for this, whether it's all financed, 50%, 60% financed, and
Does
what
that
the
go
rate
back
of
to the
interest,
committee,
what the cost would be for over what term?
Does that go back to the committee for recommendation, or is that straight to Mr. Taboada?
Oh, I think you'd have to go back to the CIP committee and vet it.
You guys to,
It came up in the budget meeting because we have to talk about, but now it needs to go back to the CIP and go through the process.
I think so, right?
Because when you start talking about substituting projects, that's a CIP committee
Yeah,
function.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And trust me, fixing a parking lot is not on the top of my agenda for sexy projects to do. I mean,
Agreed.
it's not like, yay, come out and go check out our new parking lot. It's not like we're going to get the community excited about that, but
We could just replace it with dustless dust.
how much is that?
Don't get him
Wait a
going.
minute. They need a diamond, right?
Okay.
Dual
Get
purpose.
the guys out with the chalk machine and put lines in every day.
So you're asking for some direction, Mr. Taboada, correct?
Yes, sir, to receive the report of the committee and provide direction to me regarding the formulation of the 2012-2013 final budget and the final 2012-2013 annual salary plan.
Are you aware of any LA County departments that have received this 2% increase that's used as a baseline in part to support the salary plan?
Am I aware of what, sir?
LA County departments or any LA City implementing the suggested 2% cost of living increase?
Not specifically, no.
I'm not aware of any either. Is there any comment, Mr. Burgess? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you. I saw your hand there.
I have a lot of thoughts on the CIP issue, but I'm not going to go into details. I just think that, one, this is a great time to have the public forum because the CIP committee goes off, does their thing. It's really not discussed at every meeting, which I think it's important enough. And also, I believe it's important that Cheryl is a mandatory attendant at these CIP meetings, which she would like to be anyway. If we compensate for her time, it can be well worth it in the long run. And I also think that, we spent $10,000 on that survey that was for, I think there were 18 questions answered. I think we paid 7, and police department or the sheriff's kicked in our 3. I think before we should consider, and I'd like to know your reaction, that if we're going to spend $50,000 on anything, let's spend $1,000 and poll 25 people in the community. Do you think we should spend $250,000 in that parking lot? Yes or no? Are you aware they were going to spend $250 potentially? Yes or no? What are your thoughts? I don't think we're getting the community involved in what we're spending money on, and I think a lot of it's done in a vacuum. But I think
there's a difference. I think there's a difference between what perhaps a want and a need.
Pardon me?
In terms of getting the community involved and getting that type of survey, if the parking lot is going to disintegrate because the engineers tell us that, it becomes a need of our community, not a want. And getting a poll on what they think we should do or not is not really relevant. It's a need. If we want to create a new park somewhere or whatever, that becomes a want or a desire or whatever, okay, let's get the community involved and things like that. But we are here to make sure that the needs of the community are met. And if that parking lot is going to be something that's not safe for our community, it's not really up for debate with them whether they want us to spend their money or not. We have a responsibility to fix that parking lot.
I would agree with that statement, but I also don't agree that parking lot's going to disintegrate. It started a year ago. There are root issues, which we have a tree consultant, which he should be doing something about those trees, but I don't.
Which is why we're not jumping in to do the parking lot right now. But if we go through an assessment and it says that, hey, that becomes a safety issue or there is an issue, it's not one of the items I would say we should present to the community to have a dialogue whether we need to or not. We have to make that assessment. I just think that there's other things that, yeah, if you think that if perhaps we're doing some wants and add some bells and whistles to community, yeah, maybe we bring more people into it. But we are championed with the responsibility of making sure the safety of our community is taken care of.
I agree with that statement.
And this whole concept of this being in a vacuum, these are public meetings. Our CIP meeting, you can come too. They're available for anyone who wants to come. We put things out on the table. There is no behind the door rooms talking about let's get a new parking lot. There's nothing like that. You're welcome to come too.
Okay. Now, if I send an email, which some of mine are a little less than nice, but I don't in general get responses to any of my questions when I present them to the board. That's all I got.
All right, so Mr. Taboada, this is a receive-only report.
Unless you want me to direct me to make any changes before the June meeting.
All right, is there any motion by anyone to make a change?
All right, so if I go to page 66 of 185.
Okay, let's go there.
Fund 40. All the items there is the recommended budget, right?
What page?
Is that 56 you said?
66 of 185? For Fund 40? This is what we're talking about for 2012-13,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if that's the case, I'd like to pull out the baseball field replaced with dustless dirt for $35,000.
Okay, anyone else?
Wait, just a minute now. Is that a motion or is that a?
Well, it was
Yeah, that's what I wanna know.
discussed to me that this is the budget that we're now discussing for 2012, 2013. So reference an earlier discussion tonight where it was just, it was a thought. Now I'm seeing it in the proposed budget for 2012, 2013. So if that's the case, yeah, I have an issue with that, and I want that to be discussed and voted on.
You want to make a motion?
I guess my motion would be, I don't know what my,
Well, your motion is,
The motion is to remove it.
yeah, my motion is to remove that item from the budget for 2012,
Right.
2013.
And leave it out completely or move it to another year?
Move it to another year. Well,
Would-
that's, I don't care when it happens, just not 2012, 2013. I think that's a two-part motion, right?
all right, so you want to remove it from 2012, 2013, you're not proposing that it be moved to another year? Do you want to state when you'd like to see what fiscal year, if at all, or not at all?
Whenever it's feasible. How's that? Personally, I'd like to see that community organization pitch in their own funds in this project. $39,000 is, or how much of it
35.
is, that's significant capital expenditure for one community group to be participating with.
Mr. Geller, not to be pedantic, but just
Yeah.
state succinctly what
Yeah.
your motion is, and let's see if we get a second.
Yeah, I'd like to see that $35,000 line item to be removed from the 2012, 2013 budget.
Okay, is there a second on the motion? I'll second the motion. All right. Do we want to have further discussion on the removal?
I just think that the desire to remove it and the desire to have somebody chip in are two separate entities. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean that it precludes them from participating in the monetary process. They're really two separate entities. We're just saying this is a project that we think we want to do next year, so we're allocating funds for it. It doesn't, just like we've had conversations in the past, it doesn't even mean the project is happening. It still has to go through the CIP committee to make that recommendation. It has to come back to the board, which at that point, even if it's in the budget, the board could say, no, we're not doing the project. So to pull it out of there removes the conversation that the CIP committee needs to have, and I think is important that we do have. If for nothing else, it was a commitment that was made to discuss it. By you pulling it out of there, it removes that opportunity to have that discussion within the CIP committee. And it doesn't commit the board to making that decision that we're actually moving ahead with that project.
Okay, see, I view it as it is a commitment to the board because it's been budgeted.
But
then
in the
it's
past,
perceived-
we've had the same conversations with,
But then it's perceived as that, oh, it's in next year's budget. Softball comes on back and they say, oh, well, here it is. It's in the budget. You guys approved it. The meeting, look, it's right there.
we've had the
Why
same
not do it?
conversations after with Director Ratner, who was here about the Montecito Center, and he didn't want things happening, whatever, and it was in the budget, came to conversation, and we haven't done that project. Because the board said ultimately, we're not doing that project. But it was in the budget, and it was in the budget for this year too, and we haven't done it. But it gives us the opportunity to have that conversation and move forward with it if we do choose to do it, because we've allocated those funds in the budget. It gives us that opportunity. It doesn't mean that we are locked in and we have to do it. It just means that we're allocating funds to do that project.
I'm with Jeffrey in that I don't know whether or not I want to replace with dustless dirt or not. I don't even know if I would bring it back to the board, but we haven't even had that discussion. Like Jeffrey said, taking it off means we don't even have the discussion. And the only reason I wouldn't second the motion or vote for it is just because I'm not sure whether to do it or not. And I don't want to call it a space holder. We have $35,000. I would like to give it some time to find out whether or not I really do, because I want to go through that process.
I mean, as
That's why we have a process, that's why we have a budget calendar, and that's how it's supposed to work.
As President Coletta mentioned before, just previously, I mean, if we decide, hey, we want to move ahead with the parking lot, we determine that the parking lot is something we have to do because it's right, and we decide we don't want to do a complete debt finance, we're going to have to remove some of those off the table anyways. So even though they're here, they're going to be removed because there's a different priority that the board has decided at a later date.
Okay, all right, as long as that's in the public forum, then
It's the way it's always
good
been.
with that.
Yeah, I'd feel uncomfortable removing it at this point in time. I can see some valid reasons for going forward with that. That's not to say that once we get all the information that I'd feel the same way, but at least I'd like the opportunity to say yes or no when the CIP committee comes back with it.
I hear both sides of the aisle, and I think you've qualified your concern very well. I echo the same, so I'm satisfied that it's been expressed sufficiently, that this is not locked in, this is not a threat to the board by the public. Well, you've allocated this money, you've set it aside, so thereby you have to spend it. That's not true. And I, for one, share that view on any project on here, in as much as I may have a favored one as opposed to another one that's not as dear to my subconscious, but.
Yeah. So do we remove it or just vote it down?
You've made a motion, we're going to take a vote.
Okay, okay.
And then from there, we'll see what happens. So, all in favor of Mr. Kahlert's and my motion that was a second, please say aye.
No, I can vote for it now.
So, all opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, because we've got an adequate understanding of one another. So, with that, we'll press forward with your direction to at least have a template of how to govern your discussions with committees and proposing budgets and stuff, what goes with it.
That's going to be somebody else's job.
But you do miracles. That's why
You didn't have to say that.
That's why you've been here for so long. Okay, now we go to the consent calendar. Anybody on the board here would like to remove any one of the items or more than one? This is your opportunity. If not, we're going to move for approval for all 5.
Well, okay. I'm going to abstain on the minute since I wasn't here. But outside of that,
For both or one?
for just the regular meeting on April 10th, I wasn't here, so I'll
Okay, you want to
I
abstain
should
on that?
abstain for the
I'll
one.
abstain on that one.
All right, so why don't we pull 1A and B, and we can vote on that separately. And for the balance of 2 through 5, I'm not hearing anybody else speak up.
No.
So for addressing items 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the consent calendar, all approving those matters, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None? Okay, so items 2 through 5 are approved. Going to matters 1A, which is the board minutes for April 10, 2012. Those in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstaining?
Abstain.
Okay, one abstention, the matter passes 4 to the 1 abstention. And then the special meeting of April 23rd, those minutes for 2012. All in favor of those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
1 abstention. Okay, again, that passes for 1 abstention. Now proceed to the regular calendar, H1.
Mr. President, members of the board, as I stated earlier, one of the discussion items that was brought up during the MOU negotiation process with the LAGSL and the Rossmoor Park neighborhood was the need to revisit board policies with regard to district parks, fields, and facilities. And we basically indicated at that time that the board policies were not up for discussion as part of that MOU discussion. That we were there to discuss impacts as a result of the games being played at Rossmoor Park and other issues that related to that activity. We did, however, have a member of that community come before this board and ask that we take up the issue of those board policies. As you know, in the past, I have brought to you any number of board policies in good numbers for restructuring, because from time to time, I think these policies become dated and need to be revised, but they also need to be looked at in more global sense, in that how they relate to one another. And we did that last year sometime with any number of policies regarding to the responsibilities of the board, the general manager, et cetera. So what staff has done is we've gone through and looked at current policies and have moved items that rightfully don't belong within a specific policy. We've created a new policy that deals specifically with special events. And we've basically taken a real hard look at how these policies relate to one another and how it provides guidance to staff on how to manage your facilities. So what you have in front of you is, for first reading, are those board policies as amended for your consideration. But typically what would happen is you'd give first reading to these policies, and then you'd really take a good hard look at them at second reading. In this particular case, though, I think it would be appropriate, and would be keeping faith with the community of Rossmoor Park, that we reconvene a meeting of that MOU committee, which by its nature requires that we meet on a periodic basis to discuss items of interest that come up after the adoption of the MOU, and to give them an opportunity to look through these and see if there is consensus, or if there's things that do not make sense to them, or what have you, and at least get their input as part of that committee process, and bring back to you at a later time, second reading, with their input, so that you have at least the feeling that the community had an opportunity to express their concerns or their issues, and that we bring to you then policies which hopefully the board will look at as being complete and in keeping with the wishes of at least a portion of the Rossmoor community. So that's my recommendation, that you give first reading and refer this to the MOU committee, which consists of myself, your recreation superintendent, Ms. Gingras, and Director Rips, to meet with the community and discuss with these policies with them, so that we don't have an extended dialogue, if you will, perhaps at a board meeting when this comes back for second reading.
All right, I was thinking that we would go through each one if anyone had any comments. There's 4 or 5 policies. Although it's a first reading, is this not the forum to provide?
You can, that's absolutely, if you have questions, or if you have...
Proposed changes?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, does anyone want to address 6010?
I do.
Okay, let's go at it.
Just a couple of questions. I'm looking at 601090.
What page there?
That's page 141 of 185.
All right.
And it talks about that you can approve like modifications to a facility by a renter of, if there, and I'm kind of wondering, because it's up to you whether you allow it or not. Could you give me an example of a modification that somebody would ask for that may or may not cause a problem with the facility needing to be repaired upon them finishing with whatever it is they're using the facility for? Because this addresses the issue of modifications.
We have from time to time recommendations from the RHA, from we've had projects from Eagle Scouts, we've had any number of projects that have modified your facilities. We have one right out front here at the auditorium, that tree that's surrounded by all the plantings and stuff. That was an RHA project that they came in and paid for and improved the aesthetics of the front of the auditorium. We've had Eagle Scout projects where they have constructed minor changes to the landscape at Rossmoor Park. Emily? Let me ask Emily if she's...
But these were like all for the betterment of the facility when they're doing this, I
Right,
guess.
but what we don't want is people coming in and saying, I want to build a tree house in one of your trees. I mean, that's why you give me that discretion to say, no.
Right, exactly. But it just sort of scared me when I looked at that, and I'm thinking, what might some of these people be asking to do to the facility that, I mean, it was just the unknown that bothered me about it.
Well, we going back to LAGSL, we give them quite a bit of latitude in maintaining our facilities at Rossmoor Park. They constructed on their own nickel Field 3 with dustless dirt. It was a major investment that they did and that we authorized them to do on district property.
Absolutely.
So that's, and had that been contrary to the wishes of the board, or if there'd been some reasons not to approve that, then that's where you give me at least some leeway as to making at least the first run at saying no.
Well, yeah, well, if these are the types of examples of what's going on, then I'm quite comfortable with it. And I have no further question on it.
All right.
Any other comments, Mr. Casey, on 6010?
No, that's it.
Mr. Kaler?
601092,
Same one.
Page 141 of 185.
yeah, the second, after the colon, it says routine upkeep and maintenance of fields will be provided by the district. Do we want to spell out what that actually entails?
Not really, not in a policy document. We maintain the basketball court, the volleyball courts, the tennis courts, any number of facilities.
Okay, well, when I see fields, I don't typically think of basketball courts. I think of like something with grass and dirt and,
That's correct.
Well, we maintain the fields here at Rush Park.
okay. So for legal purposes, the strategy, just leave it nebulous so they don't think that we're aerating and dragging and doing that stuff.
No, you're correct.
2 times a
You're
year.
concerned as such. It is a valid interpretation to me when you say fields to include baseball fields.
Yeah, I mean, because you look at the city of Los Alamitos, and I believe I don't know, I think they spell out what their maintenance is and what it is or not doing. And here it's just kind of, maybe, and we just want to stay this way, but it's very routine maintenance. And we just kind of leave it
Can we
open-ended.
just say routine upkeep and maintenance of all facilities will be provided by the district and just tuck out the word fields and?
Yeah, just call it property.
Maybe. That might be a way to do it. I just don't want to hear fields, because I know being like involved in softball for as many years as I was, that's always been a bone of contention that, well, they drag, they weed, they aerate, they water, and blah, 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 and the city of Los Al does it, and things like that, and so maybe if we just take that word out.
But you do take care of fields here at Rush Park.
Yeah, so then if that's the case, maybe we have to say, we will drag once a month.
No. That's purely a contract thing that you have with your contractor who does that for us.
Okay.
And you don't want to get, I mean, if you want to look at the scope of work for the contractor, Valley Crest, that does that for us, I'd be happy to share that with you, but it doesn't belong in a policy
So there's
document.
another document that's an operational document that is it's an attachment
Here's the
to this.
concern. The policy in of itself is available on the website. Anyone's going to download it. They're not going to have any other documents that are not incorporated by reference, such as what we're talking about, the obligations of the contractor, Valley Crest. So thereby the argument can be made, you do the maintenance of the fields. And then you would say, oh, no, we only do this. Well, when I signed for this agreement for a term of time to use the fields, you didn't bring out the document that said, well, you were going to do this much and we were required to do that much. And so to not get yourself in that loophole, you need to be sensitive to the fact that someone can turn that on you.
Yeah, maybe it's
And
just-
you'd have to contend with it and qualify it, and you'd be doing the heebie-jeebies backing up, trying to qualify your strength of your position, when they're also thinking they're in a position of strength, based upon the reading of this document.
Yeah,
So
maybe it just says routine upkeep and maintenance will be provided by the district. Just take out those 2 words, and that's even more nebulous. So we don't have to
I would take out fields.
fields and facilities and just, I don't know,
Because-
I'm just throwing it out there, just kind of being on the other side of the fence.
I would just put in a generic word that covers everything and just call it property. Property is land, property is buildings. I'm not the attorney, but that's, there has to be some word that
Yeah.
defines the
Maybe.
whole thing without being too specific and not having a huge paragraph outlining every
I
and
could be
all kinds of
nitpicking. I could be nitpicking.
real
I
property.
just-
No, it's a valid point, because the buyer, prospective user is going to be looking for these terms of art, just like when you look to go purchase a product, you do your vetting, you do your homework.
Yeah.
And you make an objective, well-formed, informed decision.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing here
Yeah,
by
well,
examining
yeah.
this.
Well, like that MOU is going to come up again sometime in the future, and I don't want to have to revisit this at that time.
So
Isn't there a document that when somebody rents one of our facilities, that they get some sort of procedures or something? What are they're signing something, right, that says what they're responsible for?
Well, they get a user permit that sets forth the conditions for the use of the property, yes.
I mean, so there's a document that spells out, I mean, if somebody's renting our facility, this is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do.
Oh, I'm hearing use though, Mr. Rips. I'm not hearing who's maintaining, because this document still stands out as something they would have. And use is one thing, but this is speaking of maintenance. So that's the dilemma. So I think,
But I guess what is the dilemma? If
Yeah.
I rent as for a birthday party, some softball field for my kids to have a birthday party, I would expect that it's maintained by the district.
Well, let's say you're AYSO, okay, and you rent fields out for soccer, right? You expect the fields to be aerated, mowed, not watered profusely. I mean, you expect a certain amount of playability over that season, 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, wherever that season is. And what if we get, an inordinate amount of rain and they come back and they complain, well, the fields didn't drain properly because you didn't do your routine maintenance, like the city of Los Al, like the city of Seal Beach, the city of
So
somebody else does.
what if they come back and they say, we couldn't use it for 2 weeks, we want our money back? We're going to give our money back.
That's what we do. This is not an issue for us, not at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the...
I would propose, because I'm hearing it from Mr.
Just throwing it out.
Maynard, I'm hearing it from Mr. Kaler, the word fields is the problem. If you take out the word fields, you are not representing that the field is going to be maintained to the condition of an organized sport team's desire. And that if they want it to be that that level, they're going to be a long-term user. They can cultivate it to their desire, to their playing needs, their wishes. So to not get into that debate, you remove the word fields, and then they can't come to you and say, well, look.
Yeah, if it's worded incorrectly, you're saying that this becomes a warranty.
It can be. I would argue that. I'm thinking if I were
Maybe.
out there with them, okay, I'm just trying to be with my eyes
I
wide
suggested a
open.
while ago we take it out, but we kept talking, so I'm just...
Okay, well,
If we're going to just keep talking, I'm just bringing up more...
Well, I suggest we take it out.
So it's fine.
this is a first read.
First read.
This is a first read. This is where we're discussing. This is,
Okay.
So let's go to the next sentence.
so
Let's go to the next
Sentence? What do you mean the next sentence?
So we're going to take out the word fields. Is that correct?
I like that, yeah. And I don't mean to nitpick, but,
A property, I don't know, facilities, just
yeah, just take out the word fields.
fields and, as I said, the routine upkeep and maintenance of facility would be provided by the district.
I love that.
You would.
Anything else, Mr. Kaler, on this particular policy? Mr. Maynard?
No.
Mr. Rips?
I just wanted to make sure, just from the preschool that rents out, or whoever rents out the Montecito Center for their school, that is under 601002? Is that where they fall under?
They're a long-term user.
So I'm confused. It says long-term use shall be limited to 6 months. User requests which do not exceed 4 days in each month, 4 hours in each day may be authorized. It says it's supposed to be limited to 6 months, right? Based on this change? Am I reading this correctly?
What page are you
Yeah,
on,
we've
sir?
just, I'm sorry, 139 of 185.
139.
Yeah, I see this.
There you go. You got
By
it?
changing that, we say they can't come?
No, it's just saying anything beyond 6 months is board approvals, the way I read that,
Yeah.
which we should, because.
Every
that's-
long-term user renews their user permit on a regular basis.
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, I have some comments too, Mr. Tadwater. On 6010, page 140 of 185, paragraph 6010.50. You discuss the application of a user permit for groups of more than 50, must sign the hold harmless agreement. Then you state a user permit issued by the district is required for outdoor gatherings in which more than 75 individuals be present. Why did you increase from 50 to 75?
We actually didn't. What we're saying is that if you have 50 individuals, you don't need a permit. You're not paying for an application for a user permit. We're simply asking you for a hold harmless agreement for that particular activity. At 75, we're saying we want a user permit to begin the process. And if you go to 150, I believe it's 150, we
Yes.
also want a certificate of indemnification. So we have 3 levels, basically. At 50 people, we don't want to bother people who are just having a family gathering or something like that. But once you cross that 75 threshold, now you're approaching an activity that could generate activity that might turn into something other than what was intended. And so at that point, we're saying we want a user permit.
Okay. Then the third sentence I would propose, taking the word must out. Applications for outdoor gatherings of 150 or more individuals shall include a certificate of insurance and shall also sign the district's standard hold harmless agreement. The last paragraph, same page, second sentence, I would propose taking the word must out. It should state, shall also provide a certificate of insurance naming the district as an additional insured. Page 141 of 185. I would propose under 6010.90, the first paragraph, the last sentence, it states, special conditions imposed by the general manager are binding and shall be noted on the user permit, period.
Okay.
We've already heard the other comments earlier with 601092. And then page 142 of 185, the very first paragraph, I would remove the word will and replace it with shall, such that it will read, modification shall be responsible to provide a certificate of insurance. In the last sentence of the same first paragraph, the user shall be billed for the additional cost required to make repairs or replacement. Did you get that, Ms. Deering?
I didn't get the number on
If
it.
she didn't, Emily did.
142 on 185, take out the words will and use the word shall in the first paragraph.
Excuse me.
On 601093, the next paragraph on page 142 of 185, talks about donations, and it's a definition of donations, I guess. Donations, any donation and or installation of a building, structure, equipment, comma, I would propose the following words, materials, comma, labor, comma, or other items shall require approval by the board, and the rest is adequate. Okay, now we go to 6011.
Let's get back to 601093.
90, what?
601093, donations, installations, building, structure, equipment. When you start bringing in things like labor and these other
Materials?
materials and all of that, you're restricting me from engaging with the Eagle Scout to do a minor project on our property.
But you could say that.
I don't think you want board approval every time we do just a little,
No, I didn't read it that way. I mean, I could make that same argument for any other descriptive term here. The Eagle Scouts could, install something on a building or in structure, and you would say the same argument. I didn't read it that way.
It says shall require approval by the board.
I mean, it doesn't matter who the group is. Technically, you're correct, but that didn't enter my mind. I mean, it seemed to be an innocuous, benign Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
Well, that's the whole, by putting the word labor, I think is the sticking point. Because now you have service organizations who want to come and help our community, and every time they want to help, instead of Henry saying, here, weed this section or do this section, that always has to come here. Now, on one end, I like it when the Eagle Scout comes and addresses the board. I think that's great for the community, but in the scheme of service organizations who just want to serve, I think it makes it prohibitive.
What about materials?
If they want to donate wood, or nails, I don't get that.
Okay, all right. All right, I'll stand corrected on the last revision on 601093. All right, then moving on to 6011, anyone have comments? Mr. Casey?
60, let me see, just a second.
By the way, my red line is blue.
Yes, it is.
It's hard to read.
So is mine.
Oh, I love it.
That-
It's easier than I think.
That happens with one computer to another with a different operating, 2003 or 2007, and we haven't figured out how to make that compatible.
Actually, the only comment I have on 6011 is on page 159 of 185, and it's just that the word fireworks was in there twice.
Really?
So that's like almost a nothing change.
Okay. Mr. Kaler?
I'm shocked that you found the word fireworks twice.
You know what, so am I.
I'm really stunned.
He was having a blast reading that section.
No, I hope not.
I have no changes.
On 153 of 185, you can go there, Mr. Tabwada, paragraph 6011.50. Vending and commercial solicitation. The third line talks about merchandise or food products or offers services for compensation or distribute or pass out any, and you use the word primarily. Did you mean to include that word primarily, or is that unintended?
That's your current policy.
That's the current policy? I'm sorry?
It's the current policy, or it would be redlined.
Emily, go to the podium so we can hear you.
Regarding that policy, that came verbatim from the OC Penal Code. I went through the OC Penal Codes and modified our previous, or our current policies to be updated to those penal codes.
I wouldn't include primarily, but if the code states it, then I'll leave it at that.
Keeper.
It just reads, it provides a subjective interpretation, what's primarily versus not.
Right.
You could say it, and I could say it's something different, and then we would never have a meeting of the minds, and that's why I bring it up.
I actually agree with you, but if it's part of the penal code, I think we...
I didn't know it was part of the penal code, California Penal Code.
A lot of the changes to 6011 were taking our current policies and updating them, like I said, which is why you'll see the minor changes. I think these were originally originated from the penal codes with words changed.
Yeah. There's a small typo on 155 of 185, 6011.80. It says paintball gun. I think we meant paintball gun. Just there's the toolbar on the...
Paintballs are painful.
Paintball.
Maybe it isn't your paint, it's a paintball.
It's not my sport, not my sport.
I don't want to go there.
I didn't really catch anything else on this one.
I've got a couple.
Go ahead.
On 6011.98, this is 155 of 1985.
Okay.
It looks like we have a skateboard policy that's being expanded. So obviously scooters and other things can't be in the park. Is there a reason for this? Is there a insurance policy or liability or something that people can't have scooters, but only bicycles?
I think we tried to limit those activities which have the potential for some liability. Bicycles are, I don't know, a common use activity. When you get motorized skateboards, motorized...
Well, I understand
yeah.
anything motorized. That makes sense. I understand skateboards because they can fly off people's feet and there's nothing to hold on to. But I see crazy kids doing things with these BMX bikes that's more crazy on those bikes than my little daughters and their scooters going down the sidewalk. So I myself am not for something where at least scooters have a handle on it. And I know that any mode of transportation can be abused. Obviously, I get that. I also understand we have an insurance premium, and there's liabilities, but I would prefer that people who have the scooters wearing helmets should be able to have the same access as kids on a bicycle. So that's the problem I have with that particular section.
I don't think we don't have a problem with it.
Pardon?
We don't have a problem with eliminating it.
Okay, well, I would at least suggest, and if someone has a different point of view, I'm
No,
obviously.
I think that's the benign form to me.
It's tough.
Handle my
It
daughter.
It has a
with
handle
it.
on it,
Yeah,
and they,
right.
yeah.
It's either a blade with a handle or it's a four-wheel with a handle on it.
Yeah.
Right.
On section, oh, I'm sorry, anyone else on modes of transportation?
I will say that I agree that we should take scooters out there. I'm not sure that, I think the skateboarders are going to be a little bit upset. I mean,
But we've always had that policy about skateboards.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
we looked
people
at,
ride their skateboards just as they ride bikes and your statement about BMX people doing crazy things, and I mean,
Yeah.
it's just valid for a skateboard as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
I see Ron all the time riding a skateboard down the street.
I do. That's why I bring it up.
It's embarrassing.
He wears a helmet though, so it's okay.
Anything else?
On the amplified sound system, do we define amplified, or does this mean I can't bring my little Bose extend speaker on my phone?
that's a real tough nut for us, because what we try to do is not limit the ability of a small group or even a larger group to have some amplified music as part of their activity.
Yeah.
But we have no way to distinguish between loud and louder. We don't have,
Decibel equipment to read
we
decibel.
don't, and even if we did, we probably wouldn't know how to use it. And so we try to be reasonable. When people say, can we have music, we ask them very specifically, what are you bringing? What are the size of the speakers? What are the, we query them to find out what it is that they want to do and base our decision subjectively on what they tell us. But then if they show up and they've got a big boombox type speakers and what have you, we're going to shut them down.
Right.
So we try to just be reasonable about how we approve those uses versus just saying no music, because that really does limit. We
Yeah.
couldn't have movies in the park if we didn't have amplified sound. We couldn't have a concert in the park if we didn't have amplified sound.
Of course.
So it just, there is no language that we can reasonably put in there that takes care of all, of all, every description of noise. I mean, it's just,
Well, yeah, I know that we're trying to protect against a certain thing. Obviously, if people bring their little boom box and have some music in the background, that's not what this is meant to mean. That if you're going to actually have a sound reinforcement system, or maybe Don, you can help us with the language technology. Is there language that defines what amplified sound reinforcement is, or the terms that you would use as a techno guy?
they have.
Because that's what we're really trying to protect against.
It's called sound pressure level. It's measured in decibels.
Okay.
And it's a logarithmic scale. So a contemporary rock praise service in a church would be about 97 to 98 dB. If you drop down to 90, it would be a lot quieter, like half as quiet 2 times. The other critical thing is at what distance from the noise source do you have, say, 90 dB of sound pressure level? And so in the park situation, you'd maybe want to measure it at the perimeter of the park, because past that you'd be bothering residents to some varying degree. So wherever their event is, there'd be a distance from that to the perimeter of the park, and it can be no louder than, say, 80 decibels or something reasonable.
We typically tell people that if we get complaints about noise, we're going to come and ask you to tone it down.
Sure.
We just try to be reasonable. I mean,
Okay. Well, at least you got sound system. I think that helps there, but.
At Rossmoor Park, they have a week or two ago with some sporting event, and they just shriek into that thing, and I live 2 blocks east of it, and I can hear very loudly inside my house every word they say. I don't complain about it because it goes on during the day for a few hours, but it's much louder than that needs to be. If I were actually in the park and closer to it, it would be really loud. So, but people don't have any sense of that, I guess, how loud it is or how far it carries. And enforcing it might be an issue. You can buy a sound pressure level meter at Radio Shack for like $80 or $60 or something, and stand at a certain place and measure it.
Yeah, but that's policing people who are listening or putting out. But here we're talking about, when do you need a permit? With what type of equipment do you draw the line in the sand?
Yeah, well, you could put a spec in there on some sound pressure rating, so many dB.
No.
I'd maybe say 80 at the park.
This is getting way too technical.
It's complicated.
It's a first read.
Yeah, it's a first read, so I'm just...
Everything is
Now,
fair game.
Lastly, at least with my comments, we have the firearms, weapons, fireworks, replica firearms. You know, obviously, we don't want people carrying firearms, right, Bill? Is there anything?
I don't think so, but that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your feeling on
Well, if they're on a skateboard.
that? Wearing a helmet?
It says here, nor shall any person discharge any firearm, fireworks there. I don't think they should actually even display anything. I'd add the word display. That against our policy, no one should have discharge a weapon or firearm as well as display such things.
You sometimes have kids playing cowboys, I mean, with pop guns. I mean, you know,
Okay, I was just thinking about people who actually might be walking around carrying a gun.
They're actually
Well,
packing.
That
yeah, I understand that, but when you say replica, I mean.
People that come to the podium and say that they,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
he wasn't
that's where I
displaying
went,
it.
yeah. I'm just thinking that.
He was
this-
inferring it. It's different.
it's completely different.
Maybe they'll come in the second read.
Is line 2 in that, we're still on page 155, 185 of the 6011.80, it's got fireworks and then fireworks underlined next to it, is that?
Yeah, I've already crossed one out.
Oh, yeah, right, okay, that's the double, all right, good.
Yeah, that's where you told me I was being too picky. Or
Well, we've gone
that
back and forth with so many pages, I just wasn't sure.
something about get a life or something like that.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, then let's go to the next one, 12. Mr. Casey, you want to start out?
What are we on, 6012?
Yeah.
6012 is fine with me.
Fine.
Again, just a clarification on 162 of 185, Mr. Tabawada?
1 second, please.
Sure.
This is one big bar.
Is that one cheese as well?
Cracker or something.
Now look at the inside. What's wrong with this cheddar cheese?
Nuclear waste.
It's Soylent Green.
We're just having a discussion about the title of this proposed policy 6012, and what did we change it to?
Yes. I thought it was just me sweating.
We have a title change, we'll do it at second reading.
Okay.
All right, cool. Can we go to 6012.10, the middle of the page there?
I'm on 60.
162 of 185, you see that? Mm-hmm. You state, "No person shall cause any picnic, meeting, or other public gathering involving the attendance of more than 75." But you have 50 before it. 50 is the word, 75 is the number, so which is it?
You see that? I see it. Page.
Tricky.
162,
Whoa,
184.
it's 75 because we're talking about a permit.
Right, exactly. That looks consistent.
All right,
Yeah,
so
it's just,
75.
yeah.
Yeah.
You do enough of these, and you redline them, and then you merge them, and you do crazy things.
Well, I figured it was a test, so
No, I appreciate
That's the test.
10:05 and so.
Yeah, understood.
Anybody else? No? Okay.
No.
Let's move on to the next one, 6015. How about you, Mr. Casey, anything?
Let's see, 6015. 6015 looks fine to me.
Yeah, just a real quick question on bottom of the page, page 168 of 185, 6015.13. The last sentence, did we not have any cancellation fee prior to this, obviously? So they could have canceled the day of, and they wouldn't lose their event attendant fees? Is that how, I should interpret it that way?
That's a good point.
Because like we're making them, like if they don't give a business week, cancellation, huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you're correct.
Is this consistent with other legal entities around here, City of LaSalle, Seal Beach, Garden Grove, et cetera? Do they also have that same policy, that 5-day cancellation notice?
I don't know if it was 5 days, it may have been 10.
Oh.
But we wanted to be fair. It may have been 3. When researching, it varied.
That sounds more than fair.
The point is here, we want some ability to at least recover some of this when we lose the opportunity to rent it to somebody else.
Yeah, all right, okay.
While we're on that same page, same paragraph, you talk about the event attendant in 615.13. You state, for example, in the middle of the paragraph, and not by way of limitation, the event attendant many monitor, I think it's stay, shall monitor, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think actually we have some that just don't do their jobs as well as others, so it's really many monitoring.
So I would suggest the word shall.
I did actually.
And when you turn the page and go to 169 of 185, 6015.14, the last sentence, the red line, is if event attendant is not required, events with more than 100 attendees will be required to pay the event deposit?
Correct.
Is that what we want?
Yeah, probably.
We sometimes give people the option, you want an event attendant or do you want a deposit? The event attendant is a fee that you don't get back if you wanted to do the deposit, and if nothing happens, then you get your money back.
Got it.
Exactly.
How about Mr. Rips or Maynard, anything?
I just had a question in terms of if somebody, and maybe I missed it in here, but I see where if they cancel event, the event attendant fee, they lose. Is there any other deposit that they don't get back, or it's just, they put a deposit on the room and they cancel, they get that deposit back, or what?
Well, they don't get back the reservation fee, they don't get back...
We proposed in here that they would get everything back except the fees for the event, the hourly rates and the reservation fee, which is $20.
Where does it say that?
in your fee schedule.
And then it says it's attached, but it's not there. Okay.
Anything else? No? All right, then let's go to the last one, 6050.
Well, actually, one thing, I'm sorry.
Let's go back.
6015.
Yeah.
Based on, is this where we would talk about deposit for keys or what we're doing with keys now in light of certain recent events? Where is that covered now? Are we making any changes to policy about keys to our buildings?
No.
No?
We've rekeyed our building that was, that we had a problem with, and we reconfigured the alarm code and stuff like that. That would be a major change to the way we operate if we did not give people the keys to the buildings. We do require event attendance for this auditorium and for other special events, but typically, somebody wants to rent Montecito Center, they get the door opener, they get the key, et cetera. And for the most part, the only problem that we've really had has been at Rossmoor Park, and only for a period of about a month or so until we rekeyed it and what have you. There is a risk there in giving people the opportunity to duplicate keys or to reprogram their, an alarm or what have you, but it would cost us a lot more to have staff present at every event that we rent.
Okay, let's go on, and the last one, 6050.
Got just a question there on 6050.10, page 174, 185. And why does it say the last sentence of that 605010? A reservation does not take effect until 2 or more persons are present and ready to play. Couldn't one person reserve a court for practice? If you had a bucket of balls to go hit serves? I'm just throwing on the table. If I read this, one guy can't reserve a court. It's got to be 2 people.
That makes sense.
True.
Yeah, you could have a ball machine at one end and you bat balls the other way. I suppose you could.
Well, that's the second person, is the ball machine.
Yeah, funny, but no.
All right.
Oh, you're right, Bill, I think that's correct.
That's a good pickup.
Yeah, I don't know.
Good clarification.
I'd like to have that removed.
Now, some of these policies, the language originates like this one back to '93, so some of the thinking at the time,
Yeah.
He's a bitter man.
I want to make a comment on this page 174 of 185, where I'm looking. Again, 6050.50. Talk about all reservations must be made no later than 1400 p.m. PST. Do we mean to say 2 p.m.?
It's a 4 with a cross in it for the
Yeah.
red line purpose. It's just hard to see.
Oh, okay, so it's 4 p.m.?
Yeah, they're changing it
No,
from
we're
4 to 1.
changing it from 4 to 1.
Yeah.
Oh, 4 to 1.
Mm-hmm. 4 does have a, yeah, it does have a.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's
Just looks like it's the
1400
4
like military
continued.
time, okay.
Yeah, so it's
Well,
1 p.m.?
1 p.m.'s the
It only
cutoff.
looks that way.
Okay.
I thought they were all military.
That's what I was thinking, I'm not sure, because I look at paragraph 6050.30, we're talking about 3 p.m.
Right.
Thinking, what's up here? Okay. And that's all I had. Anybody else?
No.
Nothing else.
All right, we got through the first read.
I have a question. I forgot his last name. When Van came and made his presentation with his slides, and he talked
Right.
about park usage and parking and all kinds of other things, and that we should be limiting, if we are reserving for softball, we shouldn't reserve, I'm not sure all the different things, but tennis and basketball, all these things adding up, we're creating an issue within the park. And I know we talked about that in terms of these parks sort of being grandfathered into, what they are, vis-à-vis parking. But did we look at that in anywhere in terms of how many permits we would take per day at either one of these parks, and how many people we would allow to make permits for? And I wasn't sure, I didn't see it in here, and I could have
No,
missed it.
it's not in there. And my recollection is that when we had that discussion, that we insisted that we were not wanting to regulate the use of the park, that we didn't want to limit the use of the park on some arbitrary measure, And while Van wanted us to institute what he called the latest regulations or requirements for new construction of a park, so many parking spaces, so many this, so many that, we basically said our parks are our parks and they're grandfathered in, and we do not, we're not intending on changing the way in which we operate, our parks. We will make changes and accommodations, much like we did with the MOU, to move games off the field to limit some of that. But there's no way you can reasonably limit the number of permits or the number of activities unless we have some idea that it's going to overwhelm the use of the park. And we've had occasions where we've moved activities from one park to another simply to avoid that kind of an impact. And we moved a marine activity from there to here just for that purpose. But I don't know how you can put that into a policy that says, so many activities, so many parking spaces, so many this and that. He's not going to be pleased with that, I'm sure. But we never ever agreed with him that.
No, I'm not saying we did.
No,
I just was asking a question. And just another question along those lines as part of the MOU, and we had talked about, and I think is in there about, not having, this was specifically with the softball, having softball games a certain amount of weekends in a row, and I don't remember the whole formula, but I think
That's all in the MOU. That's all covered.
So I guess what happens when softball's not taking there and some other group wants to come in, and I'm just was wondering if that was looked at to be part of our park regulations, that we're not going to reserve the park for athletic use for so many, weekends in a row or something to that effect.
No. That's subject to discussion. He's going to, the community members are going to tell us what they think of what we've done here, and we'll just have to take that into account and see what this board is willing to do or not do. I just want to keep faith with them that we're going to at least have a discussion about it and see what.
I'm just trying to figure out why we would, and I think you've done a lot of hard work here and it's all good. I'm just not sure why would we bring this back to that MOU group when their key issues were not addressed, and we're just going to kind of sort of strum up negative feelings with it.
Well, I would rather have that discussion at the committee level and not here at the board unless we can't come to some agreement. If we can come to some accommodation that makes sense to our committee and to them, and not have that be discussed here in this open forum like this, then I think we bring a better product back to the board. At least we will have given them the opportunity to tell us what's on their mind, and we'll be better prepared to respond to the board with what their concerns are.
Okay, I think they were pretty clear when we met with them, but if you want to talk about some other, it's fine. Emily had something she wants to.
Sure.
That's part of your policy 6010 and is defined in long-term use. So any requests that exceed 4 days in each month and 4 hours in each day have to come to the board for board approval.
But that's for long-term use. I think what Van was looking at was when we have multiple activities, which overwhelm the park in his thinking.
Right, when Director Rips stated if another softball group or a league came in to rent the facilities, that would be regulated by the limitations.
I guess it just comes down to what we want for our parks, for our community, and how much we want them potentially reserved for sports and sporting organizations, and how much we want our family members and community members to be able to go and just use them on certain days. And do we want to say, look, we're not going to reserve the parks for X, right now we've set it with the league, with the MOU, that we're not doing it X amount of Saturdays in a row, because we want it available. It's not just so they're that peace and quiet, but that the community can go use it on those days.
Right, we did that internally.
We don't say that throughout the year. We're not saying throughout the year, we're not going to, as a policy, we're not going to reserve the park for X amount of Saturdays in a row because we want to make it available to our community, and I'm thinking it should be. And, it doesn't, we could coincidentally have 10 groups come, big groups. I want for different 10 weeks in a row on that park, and there's nothing for us to stop it because they're all individual rentals and they all want to be there, and it's great. But at the end of the day, that park is now being used every weekend from a different group, and our families and our community members don't have the opportunity to use it. So, and that definitely came out loud and clearly in the MOU that was something that they desired, but I also think it's something for us to think about how we want our parks to be used here at Rush and also Rossmoor. So, and it just seems like that specifically was not addressed in any of these policies?
Well, 6010, page 136 and 185, 601010, limitations. The general manager shall have the authority to limit the hours of use for all events based on the type of activity planned, proximity to homes, the noise level anticipated from attendees, and the availability of parking needed to accommodate the that event. We changed that on page 139 of 185, and it now reads, the general manager shall have the authority to limit the hours and/or use of all events based on the type of activity planned by any group or individual. I think that's how I'm reading it. Maybe I need to go to the proposed.
Goes back to 612.
Shall have the authority to limit the hours and/or use for all events based on the type of activity planned in accordance with policy 6012, group picnics, public gatherings, and special events. So we do cover some of that in the special events policy 6012, I believe. So there is some changes here that do at least speak to that, how you measure that, and how any general manager would measure how much is
Yeah.
too much.
I think where you are, Jeffrey, is basically correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have a policy on park capacity and how we utilize that capacity. It's kind of what it sounds like to me is he's got some freedom to make some decisions, but along the way, do we have a policy that says we believe that these parks should have X amount of capacity open for the public, not necessarily events? So it's a capacity plan or policy that is lacking.
And I think we should. I guess that's what I'm proposing.
Well, you go into restaurants or a room and there's posting, maximum occupancy 200 or 400 or. We don't do that with the park.
We don't have, yeah.
No, but I think for me, it's more than just how many people at the park
I was thinking like a
on
production
one day.
schedule on a line of, we only have so much bottles we can put out per month. How do we plan our capacity for different customers, et cetera? We don't have a capacity plan for our parks.
I think it's great that AYSO and the Softball League and whatever other sporting organizations are using our facilities, but I also know they're here for our families. And for us to say, look, we're dedicating one weekend out of every whatever, that they're not, now granted, people can come, it's first come, first serve, but that we are not going to permit sporting organizations or whatever, or any big organization come during these times because we want them open.
Well, you already limit Sunday organized play, so with the exception of the All-Star Tournament, I believe, 2 Sundays is something like that. One Sunday, there is no organized play authorized on Sundays. So at least one day of the weekend is open for any use by anyone without a permit.
And you did address that in the MOU as part of the fall ball aspect, was games cannot be played every Saturday of the month for fall ball.
And, yeah,
I'm not saying that this is a softball league issue. I'm saying that I think we should say our parks, there's a limitation on when they can be reserved, in general. And whatever that is, if we decide to do that, then whatever agreements we make with the MOUs or a different AOSA or whatever has to fall within that.
Well, you've done some of that with reservations for picnics. You now limit it just to residents because there was such an overwhelming demand for those. So that's one way you can approach it, but I'm still at a loss as to how you would determine how much is too much.
Is this something that we want to solve tonight, or just for debate, or?
Well, actually, there was supposed to be a committee to talk about this and work on the park stuff with you at one point, and I think that you had appointed
Parks Committee?
Director Kaler and myself.
So you want to do this now?
No, it could be outside of this, but I am bringing it up as an issue I think should be brought before we bring this to.
Well, as a board member item, bring it up and set a schedule when you guys are going to meet and talk about it.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Put together a capacity plan.
You're committed. Commit to there.
I can't believe you haven't done it yet.
I've been slacking this year, I apologize.
Okay, can we move on to the last item?
Let me understand this now. My recommendation was that we send it to the MOU committee for at least a dialogue on this. Are you doing something different?
You lost me.
My
I had a
recommendation,
recommendation at the beginning that we should take these red lines to the MOU committee, right? All the parties that were
Yes.
involved.
These are a first read.
Right, but he's saying we should bring it to them to get their input before it comes back to us
for second reading.
for second read.
So I guess to the extent that it impacts their activities as long-term users and the community constituents around the park.
I think you should, I personally think you could take it on to them and see what they say.
Exactly.
If they don't bring it up, then it's obviously, it's not an issue, right?
They've had it for, most of a week, and we've not heard a peep, so maybe it's not an issue. We don't know.
And we
But
can always
I
have a
would hate,
second read and include other
Right.
feedback into it.
I would hate for them to come and say, look, you agreed to put these policies up for review, and we've had no input into this process.
Got it.
Obviously, you can't get input to do red lines, so the first reading gets it on calendar. All I'm saying is, before I bring it back to you for second reading, that we at least have that dialogue, and if it works, fine, and if it doesn't, then we know what we're up against.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's logical.
That's reasonable.
And if your committee wants to meet and do something else, that's fine too, but I just want to make sure what you want me to do.
We didn't say anything to the contrary about having, I mean, we're in concurrence to meet with the MOU.
All right, we're all clear?
Yeah.
All right. Can we move now to the last item, H3?
Mr. President, members of the board, Registrar of Voters has asked us to fill out a questionnaire and submit it to them with information regarding the 3 open seats for directors whose term is up in November. You have in front of you the responses to that questionnaire. That's pretty straightforward. The only other item that we bring to you is whether or not the district will or will not pay for a candidate statement of qualifications, and if the district is authorizing 200 or 400 words to be used in that statement. I've obtained for you from the county what the cost would be to do that. For a 200-word statement, it would be $552 for each candidate. For 400 words, it'd be $832 for each candidate. You've never done this before, but it's not a management call, it's a policy call, so.
Well, unfortunately, 3 of us are running, so it could potentially be running, so it's a good time to vote on this.
I think it's a conflict.
Well, of course, this means that anybody running for office is going to have the same ability.
Oh, but look at how many candidates you had for the one vacancy that was recently filled. I mean, you had, what, 12 candidates? Can you imagine how many, if you had that kind of turnout?
Is that saying that the district would pay for anybody?
That's what it
Yeah,
says.
yes, it is.
Yeah,
That's
well,
correct.
And they've never asked for this before. Have they ever asked for money before? Or is this just?
Never.
They have no money? Their budget got
If they're
cut?
indigent, they don't get to have a candidate statement.
Well, no, they didn't say that they don't get one. They just said, will we pay?
No. When you go to the counter,
Yeah.
they ask if you want a candidate statement.
Yep.
And I say yes.
Right.
Well, you're limited to 200 or 300 or 400. Well, okay. How do I do that? Well, you type it up, and then they say to you, it's going to cost you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell you,
Oh, I
they
get
tell
it.
you for every word how much it will cost
The
you.
first time I
Right.
actually ran, it was free. I
Okay.
think the second
Oh,
time, they
seriously?
charged, and I didn't do it. And,
Yeah, I didn't do it.
So,
I think that's what their ulterior motive is, that nobody's doing it, so they're trying to raise some funds
here's
by
the
having
moral
community
I'd
sponsor
like to
this.
put a motion on the table that the district does not approve
would you do that
funding
motion?
this.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we move to general manager items.
None, sir.
Board member items.
Wow. That's amazing.
Board member items.
I'll table my items till next meeting.
I just want to wish all of those mothers happy upcoming Mother's Day, and all those kids coming out of school and graduating school, happy graduation.
I'm going to applaud Emily for 3 well-picked movies for the movies in the park this summer. Maybe the options, that that were available to you were better than past years, but I thought they were well taken. And Chris, the committee, whoever, I think they're great picks. With regards to the signature wall for our communities that we've discussed, I look forward perhaps as soon as possible for Ms. Williamson to assist the CIP committee as well as Mr. Tabawada, seeing it on the agenda, what that all entails.
You've already given me authorization to do this. Yeah.
No, but the cost.
Well,
We don't know what the costs are.
I can send you that on your weekly.
Okay,
I don't think
that'd be
you.
great. With regards to future years of the community festival, it's been brought to my attention that there were individuals at the event that were passing out yard signs that were candidate for political office, and there was also an individual who had a booth advocating this position for particular political office. I think in my experience, my residency here, I've never seen that happen at an annual Rossmoor picnic. And I'm asking Mr. Tabawada if he would consult with the RHE and see if there's a policy that permits persons to basically solicit individuals if they're willing to take yard signs and/or
Well, actually, if we're co-sponsors, I think that limits that, I think.
well, I just throw it out there open-ended that it's been brought to my attention. I think it needs some resolution, and maybe you can report back to sometime in the near future as to, is there a position, is there a policy, is there a restriction, is there not? Maybe the persons that are concerned are should not be concerned that it's acceptable, I don't know. And lastly, with regards to this issue with in the Orange County Breeze today, I believe it was, regarding the health inspector from the County of Orange who did visit the picnic. I just thought the timeliness of that on the day of the picnic and how it was conducted, I was just the least ingratiating to the community and the vendors that were not necessarily our residents, but outside vendors. I was disappointed reading the article that happened to us for the first time. And maybe with some better planning in the future. And it's not a reflection of us or the RHA. This is something that was initiated, obviously, by a person or persons. And I was wondering the timing of it all, given how much planning goes into this. We've been joined at the hip with the RHA for some time on this, that Sunday they showed up. It just kind of...
Well, it would have been one thing, sir, if they had just shown up because somebody picked up the phone and said, they're doing something over there, you should look at it. But both the RHA and our own staff attempted to contact the health department and find out what they needed to do and did not get direction on what to do and how to do it. So that really just compounds this thing. I'm not disappointed, I'm angry.
Yeah, I'm trying to temper my view of the article as well as what I got 3 unsolicited emails today from different people, and they said, what are you going to do about it? And so I'm just airing it, that I think it's a concern. I've asked one of the RHA board members to agendize it for next Tuesday for their monthly regular homeowners meeting. I think there needs to be discussion on this so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
it's not a reflection of us, I don't think. I think it's a reflection of some other entity not wanting to work with the community. And this is not an event that was sprung up on them as a novelty. This has been going on for some number of years. So I said my piece, and I hope I've made an adequate and fair representation.
The RHA has asked for a meeting with the health department to discuss it, so we can attend as well.
That's all I have.
That's fair.
I have nothing.
I think that's a first.
Yeah, it's a first.
I just actually want to thank you, Henry, that's a lot of work that you put in for the park policies. I know that was something that I'd asked for before, so I appreciate you doing that. I would like to see if we could schedule a meeting with Director Kaler and myself to just discuss capacity and see if there's something that we can come up with that makes sense for our community. So,
Independently?
yes,
Okay,
the three of us, or with Emily.
yes.
Not with the MOU. I mean, we should go ahead with the MOU meeting as well, but we should, I'd like to have that dialogue to see if there's something we can come up that makes sense for our community.
Okay.
Is that good enough? All right, thank you.
All right, motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting's closed. Or adjourned, I should say.